Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Naruto's prank on Mizuki sparked a legendary harem part 2. So do 4 blue hearts. Comment, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video, and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon for I have upload Harry x Hermione uncensored spicy version, link in description. It was still early in the morning, and yet somehow Leslie found herself trudging through the streets of Takara searching for a bar. Not just any bar, however, a bar that stayed open 24/7. The former prostitute rubbed her shoulder as she debated which direction to go. She was looking for a respectable mercenary that would accept her form of payment, which was turning out to be surprisingly difficult. "Oh, Naruto-sama, please guide your faithful servant." Two drinking buddies were stumbling down the street, having just exited a hotel that catered to one-night stays, jing about fat bottoms and rocking worlds. They passed the redhead with a few catcalls before taking a few more swigs from their wrapped bottles and continuing along their way. The redhead watched the for a moment while considering her options, and saw someone bash them on the head with a wooden board and steal their money. Mind made up, Leslie decided to go down the street that didn't have robbers hiding in the shadows. She purchased a dango from a stand and read the names of the drinking establishments, wishing she had enough cash to buy several bottles of good liquor. She had been up late cleaning her modest home, recently purchased with all her savings, and was feeling it in her limbs. Smiling at the irony of it all, Leslie walked into a bar dubiously named the Devil's Hideaway. The door creaked when she entered. Several heads looked to see who would enter so early, and unsurprised by the well-stacked woman, they returned to their mugs. Leslie sniffed the air. It smelled horrid, like the patrons hadn't bathed in weeks. For all she knew, they didn't. She also knew that these were the only kind of people that would even think of accepting her offer. Leslie marshaled her emotions and scanned the room. She moved to the bar and ordered a shot of sake while using the back mirror to reapply some blush. It was early, and yet she had to look her best for her plan to work. "Come into my parlor," said the spider to the fly. "Thank you." Leslie sipped the drink, thankful that the rice wine was so incredibly cheap in the country where the main ingredient was its major export. They had plenty. "How you doing, miss?" The voice had a slur, but Leslie was fairly certain it was natural rather than from inebriation. Leslie cracked her neck, a very unladylike action, and replied, "Perfectly fine." She then ignored him with the practiced ease of a woman that had been using and been used by men for years. There were some benefits of her profession, after all. The woman sighed and rose to leave the establishment, convinced that what she was seeking could not be found, when she saw him. The man was in the back, partially hidden by shadows cast by a guttering lamp, but once the woman spied him, he stood out like a wolf among sheep. Judging from his clothes, that might have been exactly what he was. Leslie smacked roaming hands away with her good one as she made her way to the table. "Good morning, sir." Prim and proper time. He did not respond, and truthfully Leslie did not expect it the first time around. Now that she was closer, Leslie could see that his clothing had several rips, probably from battles. His katana reminded her of her angel and inspiration, which further cinched her decision. The man had obviously been sent to assist her, he just didn't know it yet. Leslie wet on a finger cutely and inquired about his morning. The man didn't move, but Leslie felt his gaze shift to her. After 6 bars, 2 gambling halls, and 1 bathhouse, she hadn't quite figured out had made her try that. She had finally found the man she needed. "I don't have anything you would want." It was said in a tone that carried weariness, the voice of someone who had lost everything but the clothes on his back and fought simply to keep those. He was going through life, but it held no more purpose for him. About how Leslie was when she had been stuck in her rut working for Tasuki. That had nearly killed her, but she survived and had a new purpose. Yes you do." Leslie gave him a soft smile. "Leslie Fujiko." The man blinked and opened his mouth to reply, but then closed it quickly with a sigh. "Oh, they took his name, too. That's really bad, or does he just not want to give it?" "Doesn't matter for me, all I want are his skills." "Ronin." Her voice was a barely audible whisper. But by the way the man tensed, she had been clearly heard. "That's fine with me, you'll find people around here aren't too concerned with samurai. They prefer their," she let dislike drip into her speech. "Ninjas. Ninja. Honorless bastards." That was something the two of them could agree on. After the incident the other day when they came to her house, Leslie found she didn't think as highly of them as she once had. Their seemingly superhuman abilities were very cool, but their attitude left something to be desired. With a mutual dislike of shinobi as a grounding point, the two people began to discuss other matters. What did you do, if you don't mind my asking? The samurai leaned back and actually examined the woman. Who was she to come barging into his misery and ask questions? What was she planning with those soft, luscious curves? His attention drifted to her bandaged wrist. Who would do such harm to a woman? I failed in my duty, that is all that matters. He sipped from his cup and his shoulders sagged. Leslie hummed and thought. But you are skilled, despite having failed, yes. It was like a dark cloud was hanging over the man. No amount of skill could have helped. The redhead motioned for another drink. Well, I need someone who can at least pretend to have skill. A guard, if you will. Here she subtlety drew attention to her damaged wrist. As far as the Samura, I would know she was just a beautiful woman in a bad town that needed protection. Things have been getting worse here ever since the daimyo allowed that hidden village to be founded. You are asking for my services. It came out in a deadpan. Apparently the man wasn't so down on his luck that his faculties had completely left him. He knew she was hiding something. All the better to have a thinking man. Yes, you know your way around a sword, which is just what I need. Now I can't pay much, really just food and board, maybe a little extra. The last was said in a whisper as she hinted at what a little extra entailed. The samurai looked as if he was seriously considering it before dismissing the thought. I'm afraid I must decline your offer. I might do a few odd jobs but I cannot. Do you have a place to go? A home to return to? She spat out the words with slight disbelief, but it was barely detectable. The samurai paused. He had been planning, after his failure to his master and subsequent ousting, to simply travel from place to place until he died. Maybe learn a few new tricks, but mostly wander aimlessly. Who would really want a former in their entourage anyway? He had a few temporary escort jobs from those too poor to pay shinobi, but all in all he'd been left alone. Now there was a woman that was offering him a roof over his head. Not anymore. Leslie slammed her drink down and stood up. I don't care about what you've done, or how many you killed or whatever. I need a man that can fight, that can get the job done and won't be sneaky about it. I need you, samurai. And unless your status detracts from your skill I could care less. You won't be fired if another comes along with a better pedigree, I assure you. Somewhat startled, the samurai stared at the woman. Slowly he pushed his chair back and stood up, heedless of the people watching them. He bowed to the woman that had hired him. I accept your offer, Fujiko-san. Leslie smiled and began heading towards the door as the samurai followed her. What shall I call you? Whatever pleases you, my lady. Walking past a table of poker players, Leslie only felt a slight breeze by her bottom before her thoughts were interrupted by a scream. Whirling, the woman greeted the sight of her samurai sheathing his katana as one of the poker players whimpered and clutched at his stump of an arm. He was going to molest you, lady. Leslie beamed. Well then, good job. Samurai-san. It was the start of a legend, but they didn't know that. Haku had a decent beside manner, but his fingers were ridiculously cold. Kin fought down a shiver as the ice user prodded at her bruises and applied more numbing salve to them. Most of her cuts had healed up, her arm was permanently scarred, but her ribs were still in the floating around stage. It would be a while before they remained stationary long enough to fully heal. Naruto-kun, don't kill USA-chan. Haku murmured as he leaned away from his patient and reached for fresh bandages. Naruto stuck out his tongue and cuddled the white snow rabbit closer to his chest. I'm not going to kill her. He then proceeded to stroke the captive rabbit's ears. It kicked half-heartedly, already growing used to the treatment, before going limp in the demon vessel's arms. Kin grunted as Haku tightened the bandages and tied them in place. Now, I really must insist you don't go into battle. If you do, those ribs will never set properly. The missing nin smiled. There was a grunt from the corner. Zabuza was sitting at the desk looking over the scroll of seals with interest. But he had made it no secret he thought Kin was a waste of space. After the fight with the Anbu, Haku and Naruto had dragged her to the small cabin to heal. When Zabuza opened the door, Kin nearly had a heart attack. She recognized him from the Sounds bingo books as the demon of the Bloody Mist, the civilian that wiped out an entire generation of shinobi hopefuls. The fact that he was a renegade ninja and boss of Haku didn't help to still her fears. The man took one look at her and scoffed. She may be a kunoichi, but she's a piss-poor one. Useless. Naruto on the other hand had something to offer the man. And after hearing that Kin and the blonde were connected, he decided to spare her life. She was being largely ignored by the mercenary. Currently Zabuza was reading Naruto's scroll. As the boy didn't care who read it so long as they didn't carry it off. Zabuza was taking full advantage of that fact. Haku, next time we're close to a town, get some seal ink. Yes, Zabuza-sama. Boy, have you learned anything from this? The gruff voice asked, and Kin found herself paying attention. Despite his obvious nonchalant attitude, there were inflections in his speech that told he sound trained shinobi much about his thoughts. Naruto held the rabbit up by its front paws and made it dance over to Kin's bed. Yeah, I'm good with the shadow clone. The rest of the shadow stuff I don't like. And that's as far as I've read. Up, USA-chan. Not needing to be told twice, the rabbit slipped from the boy's grip and leapt up to the bed and into the safety of Kin's arms. The girl rubbed the animal's head and worried. The swordsman sounded excited, almost like a kid in a candy store. How many can you make? What? Shadow clones? I dunno, I never count them, it's too much trouble. But I've never been unable to make more. Naruto grinned and scratched the back of his head. Is that good? Zabuza let out a deep laugh and rolled up the scroll. That's great. You must have more chakra than me, great. Haku, where did you find this kid? While gathering herbs. As I understand it, Hunter Nin from Konoha were after him. The man propped his chin in his hand. Naruto wondered how he could talk without his voice being muffled by the bandages, which led him to wonder why the man wore them in the first place. It was several seconds before his mind caught up with the question and formulated an answer. Annoyance tinged his words. I'm not a ninja. Even Haku was surprised by that statement. Zabuza cracked his neck. What do you mean? I failed the genin test 4 times. Then I left with the scroll. Zabuza leaned back as he recalled what the genin test had once been for Kiri. It had been a silly technicality that denied him entrance into the academy, but after Serpa SSING all their students, they had been forced to allow him into their ranks. Perhaps some similar bias had been working against the kid. That must have been a difficult test. Who did you have to fight? Naruto shook his head in agitation. No one. I had to make 3 bushin. 3. I thought you said you had no trouble making those. Something's up with this kid. The missing nin closed his eyes momentarily and focused on sensing chakra. He hadn't noticed it earlier, but when he actively looked for it, the blonde brat was like an explosive tag set to go off. No, I can make Kage Bushin just fine. Naruto stood and walked over to his fox plush. I just can't do Bushin. For some reason they turn out all dead or deformed. Zabuza went out of his chakra sensing mode with a new appreciation for the small boy. He was no expert in chakra manipulation or types, but he was an assassin by trade and had learned the tricks of being the best. One was the ability to locate your target at night, or in dense fog. Sensing differences in chakra was difficult, but like how a seasoned shinobi could fight an opponent and estimate their capacity, Zabuza could sense each person's individual signature. Naruto's happened to be a scary thing. Because it was far from normal. It's no wonder the kid couldn't make a simple clone. His chakra isn't near stable enough for such a weak jutsu. His chakra practically moves by itself. The large shinobi watched the blonde child as he played with his toy, grinning beneath the layers of bandages. He was innocent, almost like Haku. He was also a freakish powerhouse. And the missing nin was fairly certain it had to do with a bloodline. It wasn't like the average ninja showed up with chakra that had a mind of its own. Hey, 2 bloodline carriers under my command. With a little training, Zabuza shut down that line of thought and turned back to the scroll. He would consider his vengeance later, first he had a mission to do. Shadow clone, uses more chakra than my water one. But it does have some advantages. Self-awareness, better to adapt to a given situation, can even eat and interact with others. Oh. Original purpose was to get out of doing paperwork. Hey, can't believe they didn't even bother to code this thing. Well, why don't you introduce yourselves, one at a time? A silver-haired Junin asked amiably. Sakura glanced at her teammates, and felt her eyebrow twitch. While she was happy ecstatic even that she had been put in a group with Sasuke, she felt slightly out of her depth. Their new sensei was smiling with his one visible eye crinkled from the force of it. Her other teammate, a boy with freakishly pale skin and dark smooth hair, returned the smile. It was the exact same facial expression, only it held no warmth in it. Sakura laughed uneasily. What are we supposed to say? The Junin shrugged. Things you like, things you hate, dreams for the future, hobbies. Things like that. The pink-haired Kunoichi wannabe nodded. Shish. He glanced at Sasuke, fully expecting her crush to take the initiative as he had always done in class. When the Uchiha failed to move, she switched her attention to the new boy. He hadn't changed, and she certainly didn't want to start. Why don't you tell us stuff first, sensei, so we can see how it's supposed to work? The man pointed to himself lazily and rested against the rail lining the roof. I'm Kakashi Hatake. Things I like and things I hate. I don't feel like telling you that. My dreams for the future, hadn't really thought about it. As for my hobbies, I have lots of hobbies. All we learned was his name. The sole female of the group sighed and risked a peek at her teammates. Why were they not reacting to this man? He was infuriating. Then again, Sasuke's coolness was what attracted her in the first place. His ability to remain level-headed and aloof was second to none in their class, the prime example of a ninja. Her light green eyes shifted to the paler boy. Sai's face was a mask of pleasant indifference. And the blade handle poking over his shoulder added a certain mystery about him that Sakura found herself drawn to. No, my love only belongs to Sasuke. Sasuke. Kakashi, despite his lazy attitude, began to grow impatient with his new team. All right, girl, you go first. He probably picked me because I'm the only one that's talked this whole time. Damn it, she smiled, easily concealing the feelings her inner voice expressed. I'm Sakura Haruno. I like, her cheeks mimicked her hair. My hobby is, a giggle. My dream is to marry a strong man. Sakura SQ. You wailed as her hands came up to cover her face as her whole face went red from embarrassment. Damn it, what if Sasuke thinks I'm weird now? Stupid sensei. I hate him. Unaware of the pink-haired genin's newfound ire for him, Kakashi rolled his eye over to her while wondering what happened to the quality of Kunoichi. I guess girls her age are more concerned with boys than training. Shame. And what do you hate? In a different time and place, in another universe, Sakura Haruno would respond to this question with the first thing that came to mind. That thing was a certain blonde, blue-eyed demon container. In this universe, Sakura hadn't seen the usual suspect of her anger for several days and as such had not thought about him. She was an out-of-sight out-of-mind girl. In a sudden fit of annoyance inner Sakura launched to the forefront and delivered an answer with absolute sincerity before the ego outer could restrain it. You. The Junin blinked and scratched the back of his worriedly. Not for himself. He could take down the greenhorn in a split second, but more for her sanity. After watching her emotions fly from calm genin to lovesick fangirl to murderous wench in 2 minutes, he supposed something was up. If he wasn't confident the three would fail his genin test like every other group he might have suggested she go in for psychological testing. As it was, Kakashi was known for several things. Among them unparalleled laziness. You next. Sasuke didn't even look up to address the silver-haired man. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I hate a lot of things, and I don't particularly like anything. What I have is not a dream, because I will make it a reality. I'm going to restore my clan, and obliterate a certain someone. Sakura's mouth popped open in mild shock at the statement. When had Sasuke gotten so bloodthirsty? I hope he wasn't talking about me. Then again, that's kind of hot. Sasuke, you're so cool. Kakashi appeared unmoved by the statement. As expected, the new boy smiled at Sasuke. And for a moment Sakura's mind held a flash of insight. She could see all three males standing together, each with a story behind them that had some significance. Sasuke and the new boy were the same. She should. Sakura shook her as the pale kid began talking after being prompted, and lost whatever life-altering idea had come from her mind. I am called Sai. I do not like anything. But nor do I hate anything. My hobby is drawing. I have no dreams or ambitions. Wow. He's sexy. Sakura's eyes trailed down the speaker's chest to his exposed abs. I wonder what Sasuke would look like in that. Their sensei clapped his hands. Good. You're each unique and you have your own ideas. We'll have our first mission tomorrow. He pushed himself off the railing and turned to leave. Sakura stood. Kaka-sensei, what kind of mission are we going to have? Sakura put her hands behind her back in an effort to conceal her nervous twitching. To her mind it was a little soon for them to be going out on missions, and he should have the decency to tell them what to bring. It's a mission that the four of us will perform together. Survival training. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. The man was starting to get on his nerves too. We already did that in the academy. This is not like your previous training. Kakashi laughed. He could see the team was destined for failure. Sai might realize what was going on, as well as Sakura, but the Uchiha would drag them down. He didn't think he needed help. Of the 27 graduates, only 9 will actually be accepted as genin. The other 18 will be weeded out and sent back to the academy. In other words, this is a pass or fail test and the chance that you'll fail is at least 66%. Be at the designated training zone at 6 a.m. and bring your shinobi gear. He brought his hands together and to form a sign, oh, and don't eat breakfast or you'll puke. Sasuke fought down rage, his hands shaking. Sakura watched the Junin vanish in a swirl of leaves while wrestling with her own anger. Sai remained passive and stood to leave. I shall see you too, in the morning. Sasuke-san. Sakura-san. The pink-haired girl glanced up blushing. Yeah, sure. Good luck, Sai-san. Sasuke grunted, still staring at the point where their sensei had vanished from. Sakura brought her hands up to her chin and glanced from Sai's departure point to Sasuke. Should she stay with her true love, or go home? Sakura. He spoke to her. She smiled coyly. There was always the chance that he had been waiting for them to be alone. Yes, Sasuke-kun. I hate that man. Sakura paused and sat down next to the Uchiha, following his gaze. He didn't appear to be shuffling away from her. True love found in mutual hate. All right. She pulled her legs to her chest and thought. If we can't eat breakfast, we'll have to eat a big dinner. Sasuke grunted. The two of them sat in silent contemplation trying to puzzle out what survival training entailed. Sai left his new team at a leisurely pace, though once he was out of earshot he nodded toward a masked shinobi. The posture told him who it was, a fellow root member. The masked man made several hand motions. Leader expects your presence. Sai's crossed fingers made a circular motion. Understood. After all, they were in the open and one could never be certain who was listening in. Sai quickly took to the shadows and ghosted beside the masked ninja. They were nothing more than a pair of dark spots traveling across rooftops. At the Hokage Tower the nameless root member broke off. And while Sai entered the building and headed down to the lower levels. They call you Sai now. A good name for a weapon such as yourself. Sai turned his false smile on the old man who had spoken. An eye patch and multiple scars marked him as a veteran of countless ninja battles. Danzo-sama. Don't give me that fake grin. I apologize, Danzo-sama. I try, but I'm afraid my efforts result in substandard quality. I'm not sure why. The pale boy's face went slack while his voice became near monotone from lack of emotion. The old man raised a hand and waved off the matter. He walked out into the room. That does not matter. Your placement can be of some benefit to Ne. The last Uchiha. I do not need to impress on you the importance of that line to Konoha. Who is the sensei? Kakashi Hatake. The old man rubbed his chin smirking. Interesting. This is good news. Sarutobi thinks this will hamper me, he thinks he can outmaneuver me. Not likely. Sai. You will remain on Team 7, you. Will watch the Uchiha and see that the Sharingan is not lost to us. In fact, encourage its spread. There is a Kunoichi on the team, correct? Correct. Perfect. Now listen, Kakashi has a reputation for testing on teamwork. You'll have to get them to help each other and take down the copy nin together. The short paper was a welcome excuse for a trip. Kotaro folded the message and slipped it into his robes with a flourish. Well. Kurumi dear. Get the bags. The old puppet maker cheered as he practically danced down the stairs. His apprentice let out a squeak as the man took her hands and began waltzing around the room. Kotaro-san. What's going on? Vacation my dear. Vacation. He raised his arm and spun her around before sending the slight girl into a stuffed sofa. Kotaro pulled his pipe from a pouch in his sleeve and lit it. I'll be out of this blasted desert and in a forest. Konoha. Village hidden in the leaves, should have been called village hidden in the hot springs. Kurumi straightened her light blue robes and tried to catch her breath. She was not used to dancing over furniture. She never had any form of shinobi training, unlike her master who had been considered for genin before quitting the academy in favor of work in the puppet arts. We are going to a hot springs. Kotaro held a hand to his heart. He just knew the girl would be disappointed with his next statement. Ah, so sorry Kurumi dear, you can't come. Her lip quivered. Why not Kotaro-san? Did I do something wrong? Maybe I should stop accepting them based on cuteness. She's been talking to Haruhi. Learning about my weakness. Huh. Clever girls. The sofa sagged slightly as the man sat next to the girl. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders comfortingly. Now Kurumi dear. It was nothing you did. It simply isn't possible to make a getaway with you, someone needs to cover for me. Kurumi looked at her knees with a pout. What do you mean? Why would someone need to cover for you? It's a legitimate business thing, right? Well yes. But you know how picky and annoying bureaucracy can be. With the recent, tensions between Sand and the Leaf it'll take a week or me to get the papers to get out of the country. There's some poor slob that needs my help. Kotaro finished his speech with shining eyes. You just don't like the Sand. The young girl took his word with a grain of salt. But quickly realized there was no dissuading her master. How am I supposed to cover for you? The old man rubbed his hands together and grinned. We are puppet makers. I've designed the perfect disguise for you. If anyone enters the shop you can take their orders and use a little puppet I've set up to act as me. Kotaro-san, I don't know puppetry. Nonsense. Of course you do. Just keep the lighting dim and no one will realize you're using real wires instead of chakra strings. Now, let us go pack. I'll take the models 23 and 44 legs. And some arms. NCED at the slip of paper before stuffing it back in his robe. Or not. A couple hands just in case though. Save space. Kurumi dear. The bags. She jumped off the couch and rushed to the assembly room. I'm on it, Kotaro-san. Hiku, you'll pose as a woman while I henge into, yes. Zabuza asked with quiet hostility. He had been explaining the plan to his protege, when said boy raised his hand in question. It was a strange and seldom seen occurrence. Hiku was a genius ninja though most of that could have been because of his bloodline. Zabuza was a master of sneak attacks and planning. Completely at ease with the situation. Hiku gestured to Naruto who had thus far been excluded from the briefing and was content to pet his stuffed fox occasionally glancing at the scroll of seals. I believe, that Naruto-kun will make a much better woman than I. Zabuza wondered if the earlier Anbu battle had knocked a few screws loose in the effeminate boy's mind. Hear me out Zabuza-sama. While I posse's natural traits that allow me to resemble a female, Naruto has a technique that can withstand any scrutiny. Naruto-kun. The blonde looked up, but judging from the oblivious grin on his face he had not been paying the slightest attention to the two-seasoned shinobi's discussion. Yeah, Hiku stifled a chuckle. After the dreary, I want to kill everything attitude of the Demon Brothers and the co-instant damn why won't Mizuki leave me the fuck alone grumblings of his master Naruto's I want to hey look a butterfly hyperness was a welcome change. Would you please demonstrate the technique you used to comfort Kin in the woods? That little statement caused Zabuza to sneer beneath his mask. Further proof the girl was useless. Naruto stared with wide eyes at Hiku. For the moment all thoughts of learning new jutsu, the strange messages of his conscience, and ramen flew from his head. Hiku wanted to see the sexy no jutsu, his sole original technique. His mouth opened to form a little, oh. No one in the history of its invention had asked to see it. Once used, men would yell at him for using such a dirty trick and forbid it. Women would gasp then quickly recover their wits as they pummeled him into the ground. These reactions had confused Naruto for a long time as sexy no jutsu was a great tactic in battle. How many people would, even if only for a split second, pause in shock? Surprise as a well-built naked woman appeared on the field. Tears gathered in Naruto's eyes. Any misgivings he felt about Haku's friend disappeared as he realized the Junin was waiting expectantly. Why you really want to see it? Hiku smiled and nodded. All right, here goes. Naruto jumped up and brought his hands together. Sexy no jutsu. Red-hot chakra wormed its way through his system and Hi's body became like Play-Doh as it morphed. Breasts grew larger and round, average lips became full. His hair lengthened while a bit of chakra morphed into hair ties to hold it back. As everything happened in less than a second behind a wall of white cloud, neither missing Nin found the thing disgusting or strange. Zabuza gave a wolf whistle to the cloud-concealed naked woman. The kid deserved it be able to mimic the female form that well at his age. Looks nice. I'll grant you that, but some of the guards have experience with shinobi. They'll see the discrepancies in the illusion soon enough and make things harder. No. Haku can take the position. Naruto crossed her arms beneath her breasts, which incidentally lifted them dangerously close to the top of the cloud cover. Excuse me. My sexy technique is unbeatable. No stupid guard will see through it. It can't be seen through. Perhaps he failed his genin test because he was truly stupid. Listen brat, it's only an illusion and unless it's not an illusion. ... Care to repeat that? Naruto marched over to the large man with anger in her eyes. Sexy technique was her pride and joy, and she would not let anyone call it a mere illusion. Illusion my ass. With that thought Naruto took Zabuza's hand, a move any other ninja would have recognized as suicidal, and placed it against her bottom. As Kin watched the scene unfold in muted horror form her bed, two things happened. The feared demon of the bloody mist visibly blushed and giggled as his hands roamed over the ample curves of Naruto lingering on her breasts. Naruto herself stared defiantly at the man, daring him to find a fault in the technique, not even considering that the man's actions easily crossed the boundary into molestation. Zabuza's brilliant mind finally threw off the effects of SNF's sudden naked female syndrome and came to several conclusions. I'm convinced. Naruto, you will take Haku's place, and Haku, you will hang back and take out anyone that manages to sneak past us. This is some bloodline you got here, brat. Practically ensures that it's carried on. Probably comes with a higher healing rate too. Bloodline. The two other black-haired ninjas in the room leaned over to listen in. Bloodline. Has to be. It would be physically impossible any other way. Confused, female Naruto stepped back. What do you mean? Haku stepped in and gave Naruto a pat on the arm, thinking that the boy-turned-girl may be afraid of Kekkei Genkai prejudice. Even a normal shinobi can't change that much. We make illusions to look different, but to change a body that drastically that quick would put too much stress on it and self-destruct. You are very special, Naruto-kun. Zabuza grabbed his sword. He could have gone into deeper detail, but both nin instinctively knew anything more would shot far over the blonde's head. Change into the pink kimono. Make sure it's off the shoulder, and pretend to be a little drunk. We don't want them to suspect anything until after we start killing. Kyuubi laughed. The sound shifted from high-pitched yips to deep booming bellows. It just couldn't stop. The whole situation just kept getting better and better for the imprisoned demon fox. Oh, that's rich. I thought he might have tried to jump the boy there for a second, but bloodline ability. Ha. My work's practically taking care of itself. Ahahaha. As the demon fox continued to beat a paw against the floor in a fit of laughter, a thin paper-seeming seal cracked. Naruto leaned against Zabuza as the two of them walked toward the warehouse. It felt weird holding the older man's arm. There was a tingle where they touched from the hinge Zabuza was under, and if Naruto didn't match her pace just right, the overlap would become obvious. It normal. Lee takes lots of team training to match another so well. I guess that means I'm a natural girl. Ew. Oi, Shinji-sama. You finally decide to drop the ice, bitch. One of the guards called with a lazy smile. He made no attempt to hide his ogling of Naruto, and the blonde couldn't blame him. She was dead sexy. Not quite. I was hoping Sakura-chan here could teach the bitch a thing or two. Zabuza replied easily. His voice pitched higher than usual. The guards nodded and allowed them in. Naruto jumped when one reached for her backside. Haku's gonna kill him. Hey, Sakura. I'm fine, Shinji-kun. Naruto flashed a smile at a low-class thug watching them. Under the guise of adjusting her robe, the shoulder had fallen far too low for modesty. Naruto scattered a few pebbles along the hallway. It would have been better if she could progress to making shadow clones without hand seals, but since she couldn't, several clones had transformed into small decorative rocks and sat waiting in her purse. Zabuza had already created some 20 water clones in the time they had entered the building. Wearing the face of yesterday's kill, the assassin groaned. Damn hangover. You got any painkiller in that bag, Sakura-chan? It was kind of fun for the demon container. She didn't think the serious Zabuza would be so good at acting. The blonde pulled open the drawstrings and appeared to shuffle through I.T. as they approached the center of the complex and their goal. Nay, Shinji-sama, your father wants a word with you. A thug that had obviously seen some heavy action commented, his one eye roving over the couple. Naruto stuck her tongue out at the man. Oh poo, I called Shinji-kun first. Now, dear, that was the signal. Instead of using the agreed-upon name of Sakura-chan, he called her dear. Nar. Yuto released her hold on Zabuza's arm and tipped forward, her purse falling open. My bag. At Naruto's outburst the thug turned, and Zabuza impaled the man on his sword. Blue and orange marbles roll. D along the floor and turned into male and female Narutos that jumped up and ran to scour the building. Red eyes watched as Hinata moved back and forth across the river in a complicated dance. Every once in a while a splash of deadly blue chakra could be seen leaving her hands. It was an exercise in both control and strength. The Hyuga shifted the output in her body from her feet and cartwheeled across the water. It's kinda weird. Sensei. How so? Kurenai asked Kiba as they watched their teammate go through her chakra control routine. The Genjutsu mistress had them all start with water walking as the survival test. They had to all be able to do it decently by the end of the day. Including Akamaru. Kiba scratched his nose. Well, I knew Hinata back in the academy, and she was always quiet. Real introvert, ya know. Now, well, she's still quiet but she's kinda dead. I remember she used to blush a lot and really freak out if anyone tried to start a conversation with her. I liked her, because she wasn't always hanging off of Sasuke. Kurenai hummed and her eyes flicked to the side where Shino had emerged from the brush, a butterfly perched on a finger. He took his seat on the other side of Kurenai away from Kiba. The dog user had yet to get used to the constant buzzing of the other boy's hive, and turned his attention to the dancing girl on the river. The woman closed her eyes. She would not normally share private information about another Konoha shinobi, but they were her teammates. It's good of you to worry about a teammate, Kiba, but I doubt there's anything you can do. I don't want to go into details as it's really Hinata's place to tell, but I did visit with her father yesterday. Kiba nodded, his mother had gotten a visit from her as well. It was a little odd Ming home to see the two lead females in his life sharing a drink, but it had made sense. Kurenai felt that she should at least meet with the parents of the genin she was commanding. From what I observed, they do not have a pleasant relationship. The Hyuga is not a loving, happy, or supporting family. She flashed Kiba a smile. But you've known her longer, so maybe you can find a way to help. Kiba shook the melancholy air off and grinned back at his sensei. I guess. She's really good at that, huh? Shino's voice was a near monotone, with a light background buzz. It still freaked Kiba out but he was getting used to it. The Hyuga fighting style requires extreme precision and control. Hinata was the best of us at water walking for a reason. Well, yeah, but look at that. I could have sworn I saw some of the water pick up just now. Perhaps her element is water. That gave Kurenai an idea. Well, why don't we find out? Hinata, come in. The short-haired girl tumbled out of a flip and dropped onto the water. Crouching. Coming sensei. She ran along the water, her sandals dipping into the current. Her reserves were running low after the exercise, and the loss of perfect control showed it. Kurenai stood and examined her students. Shino was offering the butterfly to Hinata, who blushed momentarily like her old self and stammered a thank you as the orange monarch walked over to her hands. Kiba watched the exchange with a jealous eye. He was a good kid, but he simply didn't know how to deal with distraught women. Shino on the other hand, well, if it weren't for the stigma of being an Aburame, she was certain he would be a lady killer. Alright, this is a little early, but as you all have good control, I've decided that you three are going to get tested for affinities. Hinata glanced up from the insect. Its proboscis was tickling her fingers as it lapped at her sweat. Affinities. Yes. The raven-haired teacher entered lecture mode. Some, not all, shinobi have a certain affinity for an element. As you know, there are 5 chakra bases that are mixed in different amounts to perform different jutsu. We are going to test to see if any of you have one. Kib. A grinned as Akamaru climbed on top of his head. We can take anything you throw at us, sensei. I'm not going to be throwing anything at you. It's a simple test. There are special slips of paper when you channel chakra into them they tell you what your element is. Tomorrow meet at training field 34, they'll be waiting for you at the end of an obstacle course. Dismissed. The 3 students bowed and headed off to their respective homes, though there was a definite drag in the girl's step. Having taken what his teacher said to heart, Kiba paused. Hinata. Yes, Kiba-kun. Would you like to come over for dinner? Akamaru barked something at him, and the Inuzuka turned red for a minute before muttering something back and turning to Shino, who had gotten some distance. Oi, you're invited too, Shino. The Aburame stopped. Accepted. Hinata rested her hand on her shoulder and let the colorful insect climb onto it so her hands would be free. She didn't want to go home. There she would be ridiculed for trying to do the impossible, improve, or be ignored. I would like that, Kiba-kun. Maybe she could convince them to spar with her after dinner. As the 3 walked off, Kurenai smiled to herself. Now that's how a team is supposed to act. The rough, hastily scribbled words on the report gave Ibiki a headache. All the usual signs of false tales had been undetectable, and if Mino's description was true, the interrogator couldn't blame Kyo. With his pupils stretched the max, constantly, it was hard to tell if there had been any dilation. Hyped up on relaxation drugs, the ninja wouldn't increase blood pressure either. Then there were the drugs themselves to consider. He would have to find a way to wrangle the Chunin's medical report out of the nurses. If he knew just what they were pumping into his suspect, he may be able to figure out what reactions could be considered true or drug-induced. I hate tradition. He shuffled to the next page, noting with bemusement that Th's handwriting had suddenly become much clearer when dealing with conversation. Guy uses the kid's name, not demon brat, boy, or my student. Makes the issue personal. If that's the case, he could just be delusional. He might actually believe everything he says is true, even if it's not. Denial. Damn, I hate dealing with head cases. Ibiki leaned back and pulled a flask from his pocket. As old and as scarred as he was, people tended to overlook some of his more paranoid habits. After all, the shinobi of old were a bunch of sneaky bastards, and he wouldn't put it past a traditionalist to try poisoning first. He took a sip from the flask and replaced it while his eyes continued to scan the dialogue and footnotes. Guy gets annoyed when you try to contradict him. He probably was aware of the true purpose behind this whole thing. Clever. If he turns out clean, he'd make a good recruit, and those eyes of his will be a plus to intimidation. He keeps trying to implicate this Mizuki character. I recall a Mizuki, light blue hair. I think. Odd one. Ibiki pressed down on the intercom, and after a beep his door opened to admit a woman in a skin-tight bodysuit and boots. One of his lesser-known Junin, torture division. She was also rather good at gathering intel when in civilian garb. Ona, find out about this Mizuki. Who he hung out with, what were his habits, especially his mission files. Now I remember. Little bastard had one of the most questionable records before becoming a teacher. Oh, and see if you can search the house of Yumino Iruka, but leave it intact. I want to see if he left any plans about the scroll incident. The woman saluted, brushing her hair back with the action to reveal a small scar. Ibiki nodded and she turned abruptly, vanishing into the shadows. Ona was a woman who said very little unless assignment required it. She had a frosty attitude completely at odds with her old self. Old self. Hard to believe after a Senbon to the frontal lobe Shiji. Oh, from bubbly inexperienced genin to cold-hearted killer. Ah well. Less work for me. It looked like a war zone, and truthfully it was. The sound Junin leapt from his perch on a tree branch to examine the area. He gave an appreciative whistle toward one of the bodies as it was half dissolved. One of his favorites was the boy with the straw cloak. He had a wound that turned black as the skin around it had bubbled and dissolved. I wonder what kind of jutsu does that. Looks like acid, maybe mist. Acid is watery. The first man was joined by a second and third. The two newcomers explored the devastated area with a cynical eye. One prodded a blood-covered chest with his foot. This one's missing a heart. Whoever did it was brutal. So, how do we write this up? The first man asked as he produced a small notepad from his ninja pouch. He tapped the top of the pen and made a few marks. Complete and utter failure. Well, they are all dead. What else can you call it? One of the Junin shrugged and put his hands in his pockets. They were just genin, cannon fodder. Orochimaru-sama won't care at this point, though some of these wounds do look interesting. Get some Chunin out here to retrieve the bodies. The note was made, and the sound ninja ripped the sheet out and crumpled it in his fingers. A burst of chakra and the paper was gone, and in its place was a gray-colored clay ball. They'll be out here shortly. Kawarimi on a small scale was extremely useful, the only problem was the smaller the target the greater control required. Wait a sec. The third man paused and began counting the corpses. We're missing one. There was a girl, Kin. Her body hasn't been found yet. So, she could have been buried with an earth technique, or burned to a crisp. What if she's alive? The ninja with the notepad answered, somewhat bored. At this point all he cared about was returning to base and getting some much-deserved rest. He'd spent all night and the majority of the day oaking for their wayward students' corpses. It had not been fun. If the girl somehow survived, his arm swept to take in the clearing, and she comes back, she'll get promoted. Genin, possibly Chunin if this was her work. If she doesn't, why do we care? It's not like she's one of the experiments. No special implants or training schedule. Nah, we'll just write this up as mutual annihilation. The last one opened his mouth to protest. But he just sighed and adjusted his forehead protector. Whatever. If that's all, I'm outta here. Me too. See ya. Babysitting. Ino deadpanned. Asuma exhaled a long stream of smoke and rubbed his forehead. Don't think of it as babysitting. Think of it as guarding, protecting a high-class dignitary. The young genin crossed her arms and shot her sensei a low okay that told him exactly what she thought of that. Babysitting. Next to her, Choji opened a new bag of potato chips and offered some to his best friend. The shadow manipulator took a few, they were barbecue flavored, and sat down on the bench to wait out the argument. Ino was rather good at it, if only because there was no way to fight her feminine logic. She put up roadblocks and derailed any attempt at coercion with cold eyes and a stubborn will. Frankly, she would make a good intelligence agent, the Nara privately thought. They were starting to gather a crowd in the street, which was quickly putting more pressure on Asuma. He didn't want to suffer the teasing that would come from the other Junin if it was discovered he had been arguing with his students in the middle of the village. It's the Hokage's grandson. Come on. His normal babysitter, point to Ino. Got roped into taking a mission. He won't be back till tomorrow and someone needs to make sure the kid doesn't kill himself. The purple-clad girl held her ground. We shouldn't be doing any more missions. Why don't you train us? I'm sick of babysitting and gardening. If I wanted to do those kind of things I would never have signed up at the academy. Asuma groaned. He had to end this fast. He had passed the Ino Shika Cho trio because he had hoped that the outlook of their parents had passed to them. Great teamwork coupled with laid-back attitudes. What every lazy Junin instructor hoped for. Shikamaru and Choji fit the bill, but their female comrade apparently had some drive that would not be tempered. I will teach you spying techniques. A delicate golden eyebrow rose. Oh, we'll actually learn something new. Asuma nodded and motioned for his team to move. Kurenai's gonna give me so much shit about this. I was once a guard to the daimyo of fire, you know, I know quite a few tricks of the trade. I'll tell you and you can practice with Konohamaru. Ino grinned, her eyes flashing toward her two teammates. They stood up and Shikamaru snorted. Mission success. The Ino Shika Cho trio was about to go from being famous to infamous. Their teamwork was spot on, but their goals were not. Asuma sucked in Annette, her lungful of smoke, and leapt to the roofs intending to get away from the crowd. His students followed him with minor difficulty. Shikamaru, you sure you want to do this? Choji asked, at a loss as to why his buddy would want to take the mission. It had taken some work to manipulate the scrolls so that they would be elected for the mission, and the Nara clan was famous for laziness. Yeah, think about it. Ino gets the information she wants, and we can lock the brat in a room and take a break. Everyone's happy. Actually, Shikamaru, if what Asuma-sensei has hinted at means anything, the tech Nixielmi teaching us means we can't lock the kid up. Ino snickered. Unbothered, the Nara just shrugged. We can take shifts then. I take it to be stealth techniques. She nodded with a smile. Stealth. as well as some jutsu that can be tied to the target's clothing to listen in. The only problem is it has limited range. That might actually be worth it. Choji smiled, happy that his friend and teammate were getting along. Perhaps the girl would want to be his friend too. Hey, Ino, would you like a chip? The girl blinked as they arrived at the building where they would be picking up their charge for the evening. I'm on a diet. At Choji's shocked look, she suddenly found herself uncomfortable. You don't need a diet. You look good, and it's bad for a shinobi not to eat. Unhealthy. Choji's got a point. Ino looked back and forth at the two boys. Well, I do want to be a great kunoichi. Better than Sakura, and she's on a diet too. I guess. Asuma followed the small boy with the scarf out of the building. An ominous feeling settling in. All three of his students were eating chips. The Hokage's grandson pointed at them, angry. What? You're not awesome ninjas. You're pigs. Ino crumpled her bag in her hands. A light killing intent radiating off of her. What did you call us? As the girl began to beat the kid they were supposed to be looking after, Choji couldn't help but think, us. I guess that means we're friends now. Asuma held his head in his hands. Ino, if you punch him anymore his nose will break. Kin braced her side with a hand as she walked toward the building. They should have returned to the cabin earlier, but hadn't. She grew worried. Would the missing nin convince her Naruto-sama to leave without her? The recovering kunoichi bit her lip as she did not take her promises lightly and would follow her master until her doom. Even if he was a little crazy. She stepped over a Senbon-pricked body and entered the building, the scent of fresh blood filling her nose. Blood spotted the walls as if something had come through the pinned bodies to them with knives. Every now and then a pool of blood with gore floating in it could be seen a shadowed corner. Kin had to be careful not to step in glass from where a light bulb had been put out. She rubbed the handle of a kunai to soothe her nerves and directed a small portion of chakra away from her ribs to her ears. Somewhere, over there. The sound specialist followed a blood trail easily to the back of the building. Bodies of the dead had been dragged to one room and searched before being tossed onto a pile. No respect for the dead. Kin-chan. Naruto looked up from his purloining of the dead man's purse. Zabuza was glaring at a large safe and Haku was standing off to the side. You're supposed to be in bed. I'm sorry Naruto-sama. I grew worried when you didn't return at the agreed upon time. She looked down and calmed her heart. Haku just watched her with a small knowing smile. Oh, well, we did kill everyone. But then we found that. Naruto pointed at the source of Zabuza's ire. The massive door was nearly a foot thick and made of hard steel. Apparently their goal had been shoved in the safe while they slaughtered the underlings, and Zabuza couldn't simply cut open the safe. Doing so would require a lot of chakra to enhance his blade, and could also endanger whatever else was in there. Kin inched forward but kept her distance from this disgruntled mist ninja. I recognize this build, my old hometown had one in the bank. Combination lock. Zabuza's eyes gained a cool gleam. Can you open it? I think. It's got a randomizer key, so it changes every time. Seeing she wasn't going to get out of it, and Zabuza's somewhat threatening grip on his sword, Kin got on her knees and ignored the blood getting on her legs. Her fingers lightly gripped the knob as she pressed her ear to the door. Slowly, she began to spin it. Nobody breathed. 0.58, 43, 35, click. Kin licked her lips and shifted. 35, 37, 48, 52, click. One left. If she messed up, the lock would begin the randomizing sequence and timer. There was no way she would be able to outwit that, or find the key. 52, 49, 45, 40, 34, 30, 29, 28, 26, click. Kin scrambled backward as the door released and popped out. Well, look at that. I guess you aren't totally useless after all, girl. Yay. Naruto ran over and lifted Kin by the arm. Hey, you didn't tell me you could pick locks. It's not really lock picking, and I hadn't tried before. Haku walked forward and placed a hand on Kin's shoulder while smiling. Welcome to the team, Kin-chan. A loud sobbing hit their ears as Haku entered the safe and left with a bruised woman. Her brown hair was a mess and one of her eyes was swollen shut. She clutched the ice user's clothing and cried hysterically. Shish. It's all right, miss. Your father sent us. Father. Naruto watched Haku rub the woman's back and apply medicine to her bruises. She seemed like a nice lady. Why would people do that? His blue eyes shifted over to the pile of bodies. They deserved everything they got. The voice muttered with happiness. But why would they do that? The voice was silent for a moment before answering. Because they could. Naruto-sama. Kin questioned. Oh, it's nothing. Zabuza was practically bursting with happiness. The safe was filled with money and jewelry, not to mention a few weapons. It was only after he had entered that he noticed the failsafe trap built into the safe. Had he tried to force entry, it would have exploded and everything would be lost. The girl would make a fine addition to his collection of weapons. There's got to be over 1,000,000 ryo in here. Not to mention how much I could get for the jewels. Zabuza was a happy man. Water dripped down Naruto's back, startling him into awareness. He spun and looked down the dark tunnel that seemed to stretch forever. Shivers ran along his back and the blonde hugged himself. Hello. All around water trickled from the ceiling into the small stream winding around dull brown bricks. We're dead. You killed us. Naruto stepped back, rusty water swirling around his feet. Multiple voices hissed from the shadows, accusing, cursing. What did we ever do to you? The boy sucked in a breath as his heart sped up and his head whipped about, trying in vain to find the source of the whispers. A pounding came from the back of his head, burrowing behind his eyeballs. You ripped off my arm. I had a girlfriend, a mother. Who will tell them what you've done? You killed us all, brat. Hell spawn. Hell spawn. Inhuman cretin. Cold fingers of darkness began to encroach on his position, eating the light as the throbbing in his head increased. Nar. Yuto groaned and felt his teeth grind together as he tried to block out the voices and the pounding. He didn't know what was going on, and it hurt too much to think. From the shadows a dark hand reached out to grip his ankle. And from where it touched, the boy's skin turned a pale corpse-like gray. Naruto tried to kick off the hand in panic, but it only squeezed tighter. Don't you remember me, Naruto-kun? I just wanted to help you. The voice rose above the din of the others with sweet temptation as an arm attached to the hand became visible and emerged in a gruesome birth. Mizuki Tem. Memo. Rise flooded his mind as the pounding of his head continued, and for a moment the blonde demon container lost himself within them. His teacher, smiling. No. He hated me. His teacher, trying to kill him and Iruka. What happened to Sensei? The explosion that had rocked the forest. Bastard. Is that any way to talk to your teacher? The shadow Mizuki laughed as the biting cold traveled up Naruto's leg, leaving a trail of strained and blackened veins. More hands reached out and held the boy in place, screaming obscenities. You killed us. Bastard child. We will drag you down with us. To hell. Hell is the only place fit for a murderous brat like you. How dare you kill us? How dare you leave us to rot? Naruto screamed as his mind replayed everything that had happened since he left Konoha. Konoha was his home, wasn't it? Weren't you going to be Hokage, Naruto-kun? Tears trickled down his cheeks as the pounding continued. I did terrible things. I killed them. I killed Konoha shinobi. I killed civilians. Who would want me as leader? The false Mizuki smiled soothingly and relaxed his grip, inching upward to look into confused and tired blue eyes. You need to go back, Naruto-kun. Konoha is the only safe place for you. Kyuubi narrowed its eyes and peered past the bars on the cage into the darkness that was its vessel's mind. Her chakra was spiking, and striking at everything it could touch in agitation. Something was wrong. What could that brat be up to? Naruto. No answer. Kyuubi waited a minute before calling again, though his fur was beginning to stand up. The boy wouldn't have figured out its deception, would he? When it came to fighting, the kid was clever enough to do any demon proud, but there were many things he lacked. Like common sense and sex drive. But the latter was a blessing as far as the demon was concerned. Brat. Naruto. A quick scan proved that physically Naruto's body was fine, but his heart rate was too high. He was tense. Kyuubi cursed and closed its eyes, watching as Naruto progressed into a nightmare. Damn it. I thought I had suppressed all that guilt shit. He can't return. If he does, I'll never get out. Kyuubi licked its chops, thinking of possibilities. It was no ordinary nightmare. A strand of wild chakra should have disrupted one of those immediately. No, this was far more complex than idle thoughts, and set Kyuubi on edge. The way it repelled any and all attempts of the fox's manipulation proved that. Kyuubi snorted and began using its tongue to clean teeth. Perhaps its chakra was unable to pierce the compulsion jutsu. But maybe someone else's could. Human chakra may be able to fool the seal. Kyuubi could faintly taste the exotic flavor of its most recent meals. She carefully isolated the tiny bits of stubborn chakra and pulled them out. A plan forming. Well, thought you were clever, Yondaime. Thought you could get away with implanting compulsions into my vessel. Become Hokage. Protect the village. Perhaps it would have worked if he had been seen as a hero, but he wasn't. You forgot just who you were dealing with. You were 800 years too late to deal with me. Demonic. Blood-like chakra swirled around the 2-minute cores of glistening blue energy. The twin balls lapped at the raw power, absorbing it at an amazing speed and growing into humanoid shapes. Kyuubi grinned, Ned revealing his set of human-length teeth, something the figures were already very familiar with. I have a job for you too. Naruto couldn't remember feeling so cold. How could you betray the village like that, Naruto-kun? The ghost of Mizuki asked. Naruto couldn't reply, his mind was trapped in a sewer of misery. The village had been right to hate him, unsupervised he had caused so much destruction and sadness. Back the fuck off. A rough and vaguely familiar voice yelled, accompanied by a whine of machinery. Naruto watched in mute shock as a chain of shuriken ripped through the shadow people, forcing them to release him. Wah! 2 figures burst through the darkness, glowing a faint red. They weaved around each other in perfect synchronistic movement while the chains they commanded shredded the shadows with blue-tinted red chakra. Naruto's world tipped as one of the men scooped up his prone and recovering body bridal style. His mind was still sluggish from the whirlwind of memories and his body felt like lead. He had tried calling out for his conscience, but it had felt as if a brick wall 1,000 miles thick had separated them. Hey, kid, you okay? Slowly dull blue eyes focused on the man holding him. And widened with recognition. Around them shadows seethed in anger at the interruption. Why, you're that guy, with the brother. Naruto exclaimed and jumped out of the hole. Into a defensive stance, swaying slightly. Now that he was faced with something he could deal with, he felt the depression and uncharacteristic thoughts melting away. I thought I killed them. No. Don't think about it. It's confusing. Gozu held up his hands in surrender with a dry laugh. His brother eyed the bubbling darkness and retracted his chain for later. Demon brothers, we were called. Didn't think we'd meet a real one. Kinda cool, that. Naruto relaxed. So you're not gonna try to kill me? He rolled his ankle to get feeling back in. Mizu shook his head. Can't, you ate us. Well, we had a little talk with the. Gozu silenced him with a glare and picked up the sentence. With your conscience. It's very worried about you. It sent us to keep these things away so you can go on about your business. If I ate you, how can you be here? Mizu spoke up with a smile, though it was hard to tell because of the breather mask over his mouth. The seal on your stomach opened a door to another plane where evil clones of the people you have fought before arise to confuse you. Since you ate my brother and me, we were able to go through the door in your stomach to help do battle. They here, which is located for all intents and purposes, inside you. Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense. Naruto grinned. Makes more sense that the stupid seal would also be a door. How would a giant fox demon fit in my stomach anyway? Actually, if this is another world, the demon should be around here somewhere. Scary. Hey kid, why don't you wake up? What? Gozu poked the blonde in the forehead, while at the same time channeling a small portion of the Kyuubi's stored chakra into him to jump-start the waking process. Naruto gave a squeak and fell backward. He vanished moments before hitting the water. Mizu looked around and backed into his brother, weapons drawn. The shadows inched forward, several of them now wearing the faces of those the 2 mist-trained shinobi had eliminated during their short career. You killed us. You murderers. The brothers laughed. Growing up in the bloody mist tended to cut morals and ethics down to the bare minimum. Murderer wasn't exactly an uncommon or unwanted title. You weren't considered an adult until first kill. Gozu pulled a kunai from a case on his brother's hip. This has got to be heaven. All the people we could ever want to kill, over and over again. I don't know. The younger leapt forward into the pulsing mass of humanoid shadow, slashing and fighting for all he was worth. Naruto opened his eyes and found Kin hovering over him with a worried expression. Naruto sneezed and felt his stomach, the odd warmth that had always come from it. There's an entire other world there. Awesome. Wait, Does that make me God? Are you alright, Naruto-sama? You were shaking in your sleep, Kin commented, a wet rag hung in her hands from her intent to apply it to the small child's forehead. Naruto flashed her a smile and threw off his covers. They were still staying in the cabin, and walked to the corner where his things sat. He sorted through the forehead protectors, stumbling upon the two with the four curvy lines. Gozu and Mizu. So that's their names, I'll remember for next time. Kin sighed and dropped the cloth into the bowl she had been using. Haku had told her what to do and had left the fevered boy in her hands. I'd be a pretty bad servant if I let my master die. For whatever reason the fever had passed. Didn't even have to use the medicine. The girl stood and took the bowl over to the small kitchen and left it by the sink, her step's confidant. Zabuza had given her a little talk about tools and how to care for them, and as strange as it was, she felt better after it. Caring for human tools was much like sharpening a knife. You have to follow the grooves it gives you. Trying to force the blade to conform to one's ideas will only dull it. Apparently this meant Kin was stuck to practicing calligraphy while the others were out, and tending Naruto. She didn't mind. The new perspectives this philosophy offered was amazing and strangely heartwarming. Orochimaru had never really cared about his tools. Naruto-sama. Zabuza-san wants you to meet him by the well when you feel up to it, though I don't think he'll be there for a while. He and Haku went into the village to pick up some things. What's he want that for? Naruto asked while rearranging the stolen forehead protectors. He chewed his bottom lip and debated if he should wear one. Technically he hadn't passed the test, but hadn't he still fought with and against official ninja? Didn't he have awesome jutsu skills? Kin shrugged and found the small stack of paper left for her as well as a brush and knife. Her eyebrows lifted at that. Ha ha. Very funny Haku, I'm not using my blood. Dunno. Something about testing your competency with a sword. Alright. The kunoichi shook her head in exasperation. Didn't even close the door. Hinata waited. Beneath a tree at the assigned training ground, one hand scratching Akamaru behind the ear. Kiba was resting to the side in a patch of mid-morning sunlight. Kurenai-sensei had the habit of turning up at the right time, and most of her students had taken to turning up early to try and catch her approach. Despite Hinata's bloodline vision, the girl hadn't quite caught her sensei. Shino voiced his suspicions at last night's dinner, and the other two genin of Team 8 were forced to agree. Genjutsu. The bug user of the group could be seen keeping to the shade of the countless trees as he walked toward them. Shino was punctual as well, but at least he could be seen. Kiba's nose twitched and he rolled over to wave at his compatriot. Morning. Shino nodded and leaned against the tree. Hinata leaned back as Akamaru suddenly shifted under her hand and bounced over to Kiba. Animals thought and experienced things differently from humans, making them a weakness to genjutsu users, and Kiba was taking advantage of that. Good morning, sensei. Quote. Kurenai ghosted from behind a tree and tapped her loudest student on the shoulder, causing him to spin around with a look of annoyance. Good morning, Kiba. Hinata. Shino. She smiled to each of her students and passed a small treat to Akamaru. During her academy years she had kept a large dog, but after graduation she never had the time to care for it, and as it wasn't a nin dog it could hardly come with her on missions. Perhaps I should look into getting a summons. Seeing Kiba's attachment to his partner brought up memories of her pet. If I may, did you three have fun last night? Surprisingly it was Hinata who spoke up. Also surprising was, instead of tapping her two index fingers together, they circled each other. It was like twiddling thumbs, only it was her fingers. Anyo. Kiba's mother is a really good cook, and his family is nice. I enjoyed it. Shino voiced his agreement and Kiba cheered. Unspoken was the wish to do it again. Obview. Sly in Inuzuka clan was extremely likable. Compared to the Hyuga they must be paradise. The Junin rested a hand on her hip and gestured to the field where various obstacles could be seen. Alright, I've set the gears. And added a few traps myself. Your goal is, reach the oak in the center and retrieve the 3 charms of attached to the branches. Are there any rules or limitations? Shino asked softly as he adjusted his glasses. Someday the red-eyed woman was going to get him some goggles. Suki watched the humans and studied them curiously. They seemed to exchange the shiny bits for favors, which the squirrel could understand wholeheartedly, but they did the same with the flimsy bits too. That was confusing as they didn't use it to build shelters. What good was the flimsy bit? Hey, it's called money. Cash. Squash commented from his perch beside the squirrel leader, his gaze following that of the smaller creature. I've been living here for years and still don't understand the FA. Shenation with it just keeps trading hands and sometimes gets back to the person who gave it away in the first place. Suki raised a paw and scratched at an ear. Humans are strange. So, they thump and gather same place. Every son. He leaned toward the other animal but was careful to maintain a respectful distance. Raccoons didn't normally eat squirrels, but it wouldn't do to offend their most important helper. The city-adapted raccoon took a moment to puzzle out the strange speech that the squirrel employed. Yeah, but it's more like every few sons. Days. 'Cause they have these e-box things that stores the food for them and keeps it from rotting. The brown furry animal turned his attention back to the market street, tail twitching intermittently, and continued watching. Where do givers get it? Dunno. But I got a friend that lives near a farm. I think she said something about a big man den to store stuff, not sure why they do that farm stuff. Farm feed family, right. Right. Makes sense. Suki watched, fascinated by the squiggly lines. Why they mark Actually, I don't know why they do that. I think it's called writing. Writing. The leader of the squirrels hopped along the roof. Tail twitching. Lady Fox had suggested that they study more than how the humans used their chakra, and it was coming in handy. But the marks were the sticking point. They just couldn't figure out what they were. What they meant. The problem had been taken back home, but the only thing they could come up with was territory markers. Problem was they did not mark with scent. And the writing moved just as often as it remained stationary. Not territorial then. It important. Suki was sure of that. Squash shrugged and climbed down a rain pipe into a back alley. So, I'm going to get something to eat, you coming? Quote. He scratched at and ate rapidly and smoothed down his brown fur. It important. Suki performed a backflip and rushed along rooftops using chakra to boost his leaps. Eventually he came to a meeting point where a group of birds were waiting near a puddle. Their cover of course was the bird bath. Nemi. The young bird hopped over. Yees. Go to the big place. Find out about writing. Take others with you. I will. She shrilled and exploded into the air, two of the others on her trail. Suki watched with a small amount of envy before dismissing the emotion. Flight was dangerous. Leave the sky to the birds and the cover to him. Plans began forming in his mind, plans revolving around the things he had learned with the raccoon as guide. He just needed to discuss it with the other leaders. He's pretty small, but I don't want to get him used to something he'll grow out of. Zabuza rubbed his covered chin and gave the barrels of Bakken another glance over. His clones, damn useful things, had been left to evaluate the overall skill level of his newest acquisition while he and Haku traveled to town to gather supplies. Now that they had some money to spend, the boy was eager to pick up a few more accessories. Are you looking for something in particular, sir? The graying shop owner asked with squinted eyes and a smile. His hands were one big callus. And Zabuza instantly began attempting to puzzle out the Mont's history. Blacksmith, former. Probably made several of the pieces on sale before surrendering the majority of the work to a family member or friend. Barely a blip on the threat radar. From that beautiful work on your shoulder, I assume you would want something a bit, bigger. Zabuza reached up and patted the handle of his faithful weapon with fondness. Kubikiri had been taken from his former sensei's corpse, literally. Not for me, though I may like to have some professional repairs made to this one. It's been a while. There was a gleam in the shopkeeper's eyes as he appraised the legendary sword of one of the 7 swordsmen. It would be an honor to polish up such a blade, a true work of a master. He bowed once again. Could you have it done by tonight? The missing nin swung the sword down and fingered one of the many tiny nicks in the metal. The life of a ninja was a hard one, especially a ninja on the run. And he hadn't been able to care for it as he would like. Now that we have time and money, it can get a real polish. I can sharpen and clean, but repairs are beyond me. Of course. I imagine that a warrior such as yourself would hate to be separated from his partner for long. Will there be anything else I can help you with? There was a wooden sword of a deep red wood that caught his eye. He suspected it had been purchased from a carpenter, as opposed to many of the slapdash swords sitting in the barrels. It lacked a cloth for the handle, but the boy had plenty of spare strips if it really bothered him. In a blink the muscled man plucked the sword out and held it up for closer inspection. Satisfied, Zabuza asked, "How much?" "Ah, that's a particular piece, my son." Zabuza shot the old shopkeeper a look. 1,000, discount for the service you and yours have done the town. Zabuza nodded and dropped the money and his beloved sword on the counter. "I'll be back before nightfall. She will be ready by then." "Sir." The shopkeeper pushed up a pair of glasses and counted out the ryo as Zabuza left the weapons shop, nubakan in hand. Zabuza walked the street and watched as people moved with a certain something that had been absent the days before. A spark. With the local thugs gone, the townspeople seemed happier, uncaring of the bloodbath that had taken place. "Oh, excuse me." A woman epped as she hurriedly exited a shop and danced around the large man. She crossed the street and waved to a friend. Zabuza watched as a breeze caught a few strands of hair and caused flashes of gold as they reflected the sunlight. Golden hair. Boards creaked under the weight of the 200-plus ninja as he poked his head into the grocery store and speared the cashier with his eyes. "Where is the nearest bar?" There was a young man at the post and he squeaked. Zabuza looked dangerous and scary. There was no way around that. "I think Ginger's Ale is open now, down the street to the right. Past the fountain. Next to the apothecary." Zabuza grunted his acknowledgement. So that's what the building was. No wonder the kid had gone in it so much. Using the trademark method of all shinobi, Zabuza took to the rooftops and headed for the bar. Where there's a bar there's wenches. Haku exchanged pleasantries with the seamstress and owner as he entered the shop humming a soft tune. One of those his mother had been fond of. The ice user had just seen the shadow that was his mentor heading off for some relaxation. That sat just fine with Haku, who privately thought it would do the normally serious and bloodthirsty shinobi some good. And while he's busy with that, I can work on getting him some new clothes. Kami knows we need it. A dark green material slipped through slim fingers for a moment before Haku sighed and discarded it. The color would be good for hiding but wasn't hardy enough. Absently the boy walked among the clothing racks searching for something that Lu cared as if it could take the punishment his a shinobi's lifestyle dished out. Dust from years of fabric traffic tickled his nose and caused him to sneeze. The family-run shop didn't bother much with sweeping. "Bless you. Thank you." Haku rubbed his nose and glanced up, wondering if he could henge and get into a larger city that might have some shinobi-worthy gear. Something that was more fashionable at any rate. That's a neat trick. The ceiling is so blue it's almost black, then fades to white at the floor. It was done with layers. The kindly seamstress commented from her seat at the front of the store. She smiled and pointed at the white band going around the store, the thimble on her finger nearly falling off, and explained. "Lots of people that come in here ask about it. My father did it. See, he was having trouble deciding what shade of blue to make it, and mother got annoyed and said to use all the buckets. It was quite a bit of work, let me tell you." She slipped a needle fro the fabric she was working on and placed it between pursed lips. "It's very pretty." Haku's eyes sparkled upon landing on the section for the heavier cloth, plotting. The layers comment had given him an idea. "You wouldn't happen to know where I could get steel mesh?" The middle-aged woman shot him a confused look before realization dawned. "Ah, you're one of them ninja types." She smirked and put her stitching to the side, standing up and brushing off random bits of thread and fabric. "Just so happens I got some in the back. Couple of them deadbeats were looking into it, but when I told them the price they never showed." She reached over the register and put up a "back in 5" sign up. Haku followed her to the back room, which was like walking into a dream. Clothing in styles that spanned several decades was stored in waterproof boxes, as well as a wide variety of bolts of cloth in case someone wanted a special-made outfit. The family has been running this store for generations. Every year a few of us travel around the major capital cities to research the latest fashions. Of course, out here we tend to build up lots of stock, but we also get orders from out of town for some of the older things. Truly an impressive selection. He meant it. "Thank you. Here we are. It's a bit heavy and big for you, but there were some directions." The mesh clinked as the seamstress pushed it aside and searched the box. "Aha." With a flourish she presented a small pamphlet to the boy, the directions on altering the chakra-sensitive mesh. Haku's eyes skimmed over the words. It didn't look too hard. And with their funds, though expensive, the outfits he had in mind would be in his price range. He looked up. I'll take them. Now there were a few items in the store proper that had my interest though not the right size. Thousands of beady black eyes stared at him from above. At least, that was what it felt like as numerous forest dwellers perched on the trees watching. And Shido had no idea if they understood. The vixen was the only one that could answer back, and she wasn't available for the demonstration. This is a kunai, or as most historically minded individuals call, glorified shovel. The woodsman held up a rusty kunai from his makeshift table. It had come from a small collection of random objects that had been gathering in the cellar for generations. It was the random ninja shit that was used in battles and forgotten about, probably due to lack of time to retrieve it all. Most shinobi use these for basic traps and distractions. They serve today as a throwing knife. But as you can tell by the width of the blade and angle, it could be put to good use as a digging tool. Shido set it down and picked up a knitting needle. He didn't actually have any senbon, but he knew what they looked like and figured the animals would get the point. At least, from the way several squirrels had started chattering and looking at their paws, he hoped so. He was willing to bet they didn't quite understand why humans would need something to help dig. This is what a senbon looks like, except they usually pointed at both ends. Some shinobi use them to knock out opponents. Some acupuncturists use them to heal. My mother used them to heal and knit. With a small amount difficultly because it had been years since he last tried, Shido wound some yarn around T. He needle and quickly demonstrated the basic knit. In the trees a group of exotic-seeming birds thrilled in recognition of the action. Setting the needles down, Shido picked up a set of metal jack-type pieces and held them up. These are caltrops. They are used to aid in running away by slowing down the opponent. Stepping on them can be very painful, and they are usually used when sharp. He tossed them to the ground, took a breath, and walked on them. Shido bit his cheek and jumped back to rub his foot. Luckily the things were too dull to cut him. Like I said, it's painful and sharpened. Can injure the pursuer enough to force him to stop. At this most of the animals began jumping up and down, pointing and chattering in their animal speech that went completely over his head. Shido cooped up the caltrops and dropped him in a can while waiting for the commotion to die down. He was getting ready to move on to the non-shinobi weapons when a nervous wave swept through the crowd. So, what attuned to the forest and its inhabitants, Shido stopped and looked toward the disturbance. There was a large animal hobbling toward the clearing, but he couldn't make out exactly what it was. Shido, human, the throaty rumble of the fox vixen issued from the same direction. Shido watched as the much more fluid form of Lady Fox joined the hobbling figure. It was dragging something hard in its mouth. They emerged from the shadowy brush, and Shido felt his anger boil. A distressed wolf limped into the clearing on 3 legs. The fourth was partially decomposed and locked in a rusty hunter's trap. The scrawny wolf tossed the offending object out. Lady Fox narrowed her eyes at it in disgust. What is it? It is a bear trap. Shido's father had always thought the metal monstrosities were unfair and heartless. Their family had preferred snares, and the sight before him caused Shido to affirm his faith. The wire traps. Sure, they could go off wrong and cause pain before death, but these always did it. Hunters use them, and sometimes they are forgotten. He went over to the macabre metal teeth and found the lever to loosen it. It came apart with a shriek. Using a stick he gestured the pressure mechanism. When enough weight is on this part, he pressed down with the stick. Maybe a bigger stick. Second time around the blood-encrusted teeth snapped up and broke the stick. Gathered creatures hissed and stepped back, fearful. These bear traps have been a problem for years. It has crippled the wolf and killed others. Shido watched as the young wolf licked at the still bleeding wound. It had healed to a degree but sloppily and still leaked blood and pus. There was no question that the animal had chewed its own leg off to get away. May I look at it? The wall. F growled softly but let him walk closer. It was bad. Can you do anything? Lady Fox questioned curiously. Shido shook his head. I have some painkillers but that's it. Nothing to help with the infection. If you could find a retired medic nin maybe. Medic nin. What did they do? There was the tone of distrust in her voice. The forest creatures did not trust shinobi of any sort. Why specialize in using their chakra fire to heal? Storage scrolls. They had her working on something so basic as simple storage scrolls, though admittedly it made sense. Neither missing nin appear. Ed to carry large packs on them, and undoubtedly they would have to carry quite a bit of supplies with them. It wasn't like they could just walk into any place they wanted to when they ran low on something. There was always the possibility of being cited and reported to authorities. Kin shivered at the thought of being forced to return to Oto and working for them. Now that she had some food in her, and some rest, she was thinking clearly without the drive of panic. It was unlikely that they would just kill her. She would have proved too useful to get rid of outright. Either they would experiment on her body or send her on suicide missions. The former was more likely. Anger simmered in her body and she pushed her brush down a bit more forcefully than intended, smearing previous work. Who came up with these damn things anyway? Kin grumbled and balled up the paper she was practicing on before tossing it into the bin. Most seals were designed in a circular pattern, with spirals being the strongest. Though there were a few exceptions to that rule. Haku had made a footnote about a man in the waterfall village that had developed a specialized seal that went down in lines like regular WR. ITING, but it only worked to transport items from one scroll to another. The seal was limited as it could only handle objects that would fit on the surface it was written on within a few inches, and if not attuned to the other scroll would end up catching fire. Easier to write, but the little nuisances were too troublesome. Besides that, how often would someone be able to tell another to put the weep on the scroll and send it in time for it to be useful? Kin pulled her hair from the ponytail she'd put it in to keep it out of the way, and ran her fingers through the coarse threads, thinking. Our role was first to take care of Naruto-sama, that went unsaid. She had to make sure remained at the least content. Yet he was upset it would cause trouble for them all. Her place in the team was a different than what she expected from life a shinobi. Mind games and physical combat was what she had been prepped for. In the shinobi world, there are very few who take an interest in designing new seals. Even less learn how to dismantle them. I've heard of some people countering by overlaying one, but to break it, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. You are not stupid. Kin snorted. She wasn't stupid, but the idea seemed strange. But it was practical. How much easier it would be for a shinobi team to have a master a seal cracking and lockpicking. In order to find and exploit the weaknesses of them, she first had to master creating them. Maybe I'll figure out how to do this without the annoying circle pattern. It's pissing me off. She dropped the brush and flexed her hand ling in satisfaction as her knuckles popped. The problem in creating the storage seals was that not only did it require a small amount of constant chakra flow while making the marks, but they had to be made from the out inward. If she miscalculated the space needed even a little bit, it was wasted. While Kin had prided herself on independent study of a wide variety of subjects, art wasn't one of them. Good hand-eye coordination did not good calligraphy make. Annoyed with her lack of progress, Kin got up and stretched. She needed a break from the endless tracks of black on yellow or her brain would melt. I wonder how Naruto-sama is doing. Dark eyes landed on a basic lock that had been left with her things for her to practice with. Or to relieve boredom. It was hard to tell with Haku. E-boy was like a parfait with all those layers. Top was sweet and creamy, and digging a bit deeper a load of sugar-coated fruit to cause her pause, but Kin suspected below that was a gritty graham crack. Curd too stubborn to get soggy and admit defeat. Or maybe I just want a parfait. Kin examined the lock and found some leftover wire in her pouch. Almost delicately she held the lock in her hand and stuck the slim wire in, twisting and turning it while listening for any clues to the inner workings of the thing. Kin decided she hated straightforward locks the most. Naruto was breathing hard, his sweat staining the wood a weird purple. He was crouched close to the ground, Zabuza's water clone holding the end of a branch close to his throat. During the battle at the warehouse, Zabuza didn't get a very good picture of the boy's sword skills and so had hoped to correct that today. Apparently he didn't have any beyond. This is the pointy end, it goes into other people. They were using branches Ken from surrounding trees instead of real swords, so the nin had thought his new student was just getting used to it, but that was not the case. Who gave you this, again? A shadow clone, Zabuza asked. Ed from the trees where he was watching the two battle it out. While the water clone was weaker and therefore closer to Naruto's level, it couldn't transmit information upon death. The shadow clone would, so it was his duty to watch and judge. To his surprise, the katana Naruto had was a good quality and would take quite a bit of punishment. He even went so far as to guess that the blade had been aired with one of the new alloys to help conduct chakra. I doubt they just gave these away to anyone. Naruto leaned on his temporary weapon, wiped his palms on his too big shirt, and took a breath. Both clones watched in amusement as the boy that had been getting tossed around and in the well recover. He went from about to pass out to barely winded in 3 minutes flat. No one gave it to me. I took it. Spoils of war. That declaration brought a smirk to the murder's lips. The spoils of war was an extremely Kiri outlook, and one he could accept. Makes sense. While other villages certainly practiced taking things from downed enemies to supplement yourself, like ration bars and extra weapons, the Bloody Mist was the only one to take it into their own village. That was one of the ways to advance through the ranks. Though few did it. Kill a Junin, and you take their title. If you're fast enough, you might even take their wife. I'm not very good, am I? Naruto groused and walked over to the well to draw up some water to drink. All the hopping around was making him thirsty. Truthfully, you suck. You fight like a baby. The water clone mocked as it took out a kunai and began shaving bits off of his own branch to make it more sword-like. A vein could be seen throbbing near the blonde's hairline, and Naruto went red. He knew he wasn't very good, especially against a far more experienced swordsman. But he wasn't that bad. It wasn't his fault he'd never been properly trained before. I do not fight like a baby. The bucket went into the air, forgotten. Why do you have to be so? Like a good leader. The mist-trained shinobi was learned how his subordinates ticked. Before Naruto exploded into a rant of self-righteous indignity, further proving Zabuza's theory that he had been neglected. The water clone closed the distance and pushed a kunai close to the young boy's stomach. Naruto swallowed, self-preservation warring with anger. Relax. He won't hurt you, he just wants to make a point. Naruto's conscience remarked. Has anyone ever tried to teach you how to use one? One watt was obvious, and though he was still scowling, Naruto shook his head in the negative. Then it's not your fault. You got potential, but it's going to take some work. I'll teach you. As the clone tossed Naruto back his branch, Naruto's mind cleared off all the little insults he'd been thinking up. He liked Haku and Zabuza. That was why he agreed to the terms of the evaluation and didn't try any of his other techniques. Now with the offer of teaching, Naruto really liked Zabuza. I'm going to look so kick-ass with my sword. I'll slice them and dice them. And put them in a pie. The voice whispered hopefully. No. No pies. I can't cook. Naruto answered as he cheerfully fell into tea. He basic sword stance and let the clone make adjustments. He still missed Iruka-sensei, which Zabuza's calm patient comments reminded him of, but he was starting to get the big picture. Leaving Konoha was probably the best thing he had ever done for himself. Zabuza pressed down on the short boy's shoulders to get him to relax, and let the pie comment slide. Part of him was curious as to where it had come from. But it really wasn't any of his business. If the kid could multitask, all the better. I don't think I want to know how his mind works anyway. Excuse me. A voice shrilled as the body T belonged to twisted expertly through the half-opened window. Around the room other birds of prey ruffled feathers in a show of annoyance but peered at the newcomer with interest. Lecky was a wild falcon, a forest falcon. And didn't bother the human-bred messenger birds. Unless she had a story. How has the hunting been, Lord Joshua? Most raptors were sticklers for formalities. Joshua blinked his perch and stared at the slim female. She shook out her feathers from the rough landing and waited happily for a reply. Joshua wondered how she was able to maneuver like she did. The window opening was tiny. Being big isn't everything, I suppose. It has been well enough. Is there any particular reason you're here? The other birds tuned in, those with hoods cocking their heads to listen. I emitted a low-pitched questioning warble to a young sparrow hawk before hopping up to his perch and taking some water. Actually, it's just that I have been hearing some things, you see, and they may or may not affect you. She paused to smooth down some white chest feathers. There was a nail head that always caught her when she tried getting in the roost that messed up her look. One day she was going to get the human to fix it. One day. I've heard it on the grapevine that there are a bunch of creatures planning a revolt of some kind. Sun up. Above, an old peregrine hawk shifted and called down, east. Humans call sun up east. Lecky bobbed her head. East then. The creatures want to fight the humans and take back the forest. I figure since Lord Joshua works with humans he would like to know. Joshua looked down at his foot and the small bell attached to it. He himself had mastered the art of moving without it ringing, but few others had. That in itself could be thought of as a form of rebellion. But the nonsense the feral falcon was talking of was ridiculous. Humans were too many, too big and too clever to oppose. How many adult humans won a fight with a raptor? Sure they could get in their licks. But nothing would stop the tide. This is preposterous. Your information must be inaccurate. Nope. I checked it out myself before coming. It's an, what was it called again, alliance. Landwalkers and sky rulers are working together, and not just the big ones. Little prey birds are in on it too. Why? Asked a dark brown male across the room. How? I heard they are learning how to use the fire. Then they're going to use it on the humans. Lecky spoke as if it were a great secret, and a hush fell down on the room. A soft breeze came from the window and danced with loose feet. Hers and dust but did not intrude on the suddenly introspective birds. Joshua's gold eyes turned to the door where he could hear the faint thumping of footsteps. Lecky, do you plan to join them? Me. She too had turned to the door. I don't know, my territory is rarely touched by humans. The door opened and Yoshi walked in, his eyes quickly taking count of his avian menagerie and noticing the new addition. His face lit up, sending a beam of joy into the thoughtful atmosphere. Wow, a forest falcon, and a collared one at that. How did you get in, lovely? He took careful steps toward Lecky. Shish. He spared one last glance at the head falcon, and spread her wings. Think about what I said, Lord Joshua. The humans you keep come from the den in the east. Yoshi squawked as Lecky zipped from her perch, casually batting him in the nose as she sped by and out the window. He followed her path, rubbing at the wounded spot. Beautiful. The others shifted uneasily at their posts in thought. What would they do if the forest rebelled? Should they do anything? Most like their handler, he was fair and sometimes spoiled them. He let them raise their own chicks. Those in the big den were not allowed to do that. Yoshi sighed and went around switching out old water for new in their tins. Lord Joshua, a female asked softly so that their human would not hear. Should we do something? Joshua turned his head and buried it in a wing. No. If anything happens, we'll deal with it then. No sense worrying. Yoshi finished refilling the bowls and looked around. His elated mood from seeing the new bird had gone, and he felt weird. It was the feeling he got before one of his beasts grew ill, or something worse. They seemed less chatty today. Almost cautious. Yoshi tried to shake the feeling. Tried. Kurr. Anai watched them work their way around the course with pride. They used the environment to their advantage and communicated effectively. Her emotions flared. She knew she wasn't supposed to teach it, she wasn't even supposed to know it. But it would help them. She watched as Hinata located the control seal of the dummies and sent a spike of chakra through it, effectively shutting down the drones. Most genin and chunin tended to simply plow through the drones instead of taking out the controls. The chunin maintenance workers preferred that method. They hated the work required to replace control seals. Shino moved in calculated, graceful movements. His arms rarely left his pockets as he avoided sets of kunai and shuriken. Hinata called out a warning and Kiba responded with an enthusiastic yell as he ignored the illusionary fireball that hit him head-on. Adrenaline rush. Kurenai leapt higher into the tree to better monitor her team's progress. My sensei taught us, why not continue the tradition? They've certainly earned it. I doubt any of them will actually go for Anbu anyway. Hinata is too focused on face-to-face fighting. Kiba will never be accepted unless he's willing to lose Akamaru. Shino might. But somehow I can't see it. Ruby lips quirked in a grin. Alright. Anbu hand signals it is. Kiba and Akamaru corkscrewed through the ground, setting off hidden mines that Shino's bugs had detected. Shino and Hinata walked around the debris at a steady rate toward their goal. 3 charms hung from the dead limbs of a tree, their small bells clinking in the breeze. Hinata continued up the bark at a sedate pace, but Kurenai could see she was winded. The girl had been pushing her limits the past few days, it was a wonder she hadn't burned out. Kurenai approached as Hinata reached the upper limbs. Carefully balanced with chakra as the scraggly branches wouldn't have supported her otherwise, and began cutting the strings that held the charms in place with a kunai. Kiba was running around catching them. Akamaru following with happy barks, and the red-eyed woman decided that it wasn't just adrenaline. The Inuzuka was a natural brawler. He energized by fighting. The more he tussled, the harder the battle became, the stronger he got. It was a rare to find such good chemistry in a team. That was a little unorthodox, but I was very pleased with your performance and teamwork. Hinata lost her control at the praise and the branches supporting her snapped, sending her flying to the ground. Kurenai's throat seized as she watched, arms automatically reaching out to catch the girl. Solid ninjas acted without thinking, after all. Kurenai sat her student down with a sigh. Hinata, next time you're running so low, ask someone else to do it. The girl looked down, ashamed, and began twiddling her fingers. Sorry, sensei. The raven-haired woman twirled to her male students, tongue clicking in dissatisfaction. After last night's semi-rivalry, she felt they deserved a kick in the pants. Next time a girl is falling, I don't care who, I expect my gentleman to catch her. Got it. Kiba looked from Hinata to the charm still in his hands in embarrassment before nodding. I get it, sensei. Sorry Hinata. Friends before mission. Shino nodded his confirmation of the lesson. Being a shinobi does not mean one has to act like a hardened killer. We have our missions, but we have our own morals and edict too. Appeased for the moment, Kurenai gestured to the charms. Remove the paper from the bell and take one. These papers are made from special trees and are used to determine a person's elemental affinity. The known possible elements are fire, water, wind, earth, and lightning. Shino, which are advantageous. The bug user rubbed the yellow parchment between his fingers while answering. Something that the academy never taught. Fire is strong to wind but weak to water. Wind is strong against lightning. Water is weak to earth. Earth is weak against lightning. Very good. Now to find out which element is yours, channel a small amount of chakra into the paper as if you would for tree walking. Hinata closed her eyes and concentrated. She blocked out the ache that filled her entire body. At least she ignored it as much as possible to complete her given task. She knew she was tired, exhausted, and on the verge of collapse, but Naruto wouldn't have given up. He would have been ecstatic to learn his element. Naruto. Her reason. Eyes blue like whirlpools she could drown in. Whirlpools. Hinata frowned at the slick wetness on her fingers and opened her eyes. The parchment was drenched and sticking to her hand. Kurenai-sensei. I think I'm water. Someone had just 120 ryo. Shino glared at the little scrap of yellow behind his glasses. He officially hated it, and ran another bit of chakra into the thing. It quivered as if in agony, and Shino could imagine it screaming for mercy as he shocked it again. This time it went straight before. Falling limp as if it had given up all hope. Sensing victory, his allies hummed in anticipation. The bug user sent a last charge into the paper and nearly voiced his anger at the lack of reaction. A feminine hand rested on his shoulder. It's all right, Shino. Not everyone has an element. Shino gave into his superior's logic and handed her the parchment. It wasn't like he needed a bunch of jutsu anyway. It would likely have interfered with my allies. He still glared at the offending piece of paper as the Junin folded it up and stored it away. Akamaru sniffed the suspicious paper and claimed. That was no active chakra within the thing itself, and so Kiba did as instructed. It moved, and so he deducted that he hadn't used enough. Let's try this again. With another burst of energy, the pap suddenly emitted a shriek and began folding in on itself as if having some strange seizure. Sensei. I don't know what this means. Kurenai walked over and watched the phenomenon curiously. You used too much chakra. But I would have to say, lightning. Definitely lightning. Kiba gave her a shit-eating grin. So I get to electrocute people. Sweet. Zabuza sat with his back against the bed's headboard, one knee up to support his arm. He was watching the tiny slits of morning light filter through the blinds and climb along the blankets. In another 20 minutes they would be on the girl's face to wake her. At the moment, his whore was sleeping soundly, one delicate hand resting on his left leg. He had a small headache when he had woken from the new information that downloaded itself into his brain when his clone dispelled itself. In the corner his beautifully restored cleaver sat innocently next to Naruto's katana like some miancing guard. The kid had been pissed, but not too much. If he knew what was good for him, he would be practicing what the water bushin demonstrated. Thinking of the kid brought to mind the curvaceous form he morphed into, which turned Zabuza's thoughts to last night's conquest. On impulse the ninja brushed a strand of her silvery hair from her face. He had wanted a blonde. A deep gold like the sun, cheerful, but Ginger's ale didn't have that. Apparently blondes were already rare enough and very few missed an opportunity to wed well. Keiko was the closest thing, her ashen hair a genetic quirk that popped up every few generations. His hand followed the curve of her neck, pausing for a moment as he watched her pulse beat in the jugular, before continuing. She was still naked, having not bothered to dress after the third time, and shivered as he touched her thighs. She had good, child-bearing thighs. Not many of the selection did, and it was one of the reasons he picked her. For some strange, unknown reason women of the last few decades had gotten it into their heads that men found slim bodies attractive. It was true, but only to a certain extent. Zabuza had always been attracted to women that had meat on their bones, something he could hold on to. He squeezed the sleeping Kiko's bottom in satisfaction and she curled up in response. Not like the skinny things that pass for models these days. I could break them in two with one hand. Good behavior should always be rewarded. Or at least that was what one of his teachers once said. Zabuza stepped onto the wood floor and the mattress let out a relieved sigh. The bed was made of a sturdy wood, built to last. It also helped to keep things seem more private during the activities. Momochi-sama, Keiko muttered, still half asleep. When he had gotten up it shifted the mattress enough to rouse her. Zabuza ignored the question as he was digging through his clothing, looking for his pants. The woman tilted her head and yawned, gesturing vaguely to the opposite wall where they had been thrown sometime in the night. He picked them up from under a leather newly upholstered armchair and found a small scroll in one of the pockets. "What's your favorite color?" Keiko drew the quilt over her head and wriggled suggestively to the other end. She poked her head out from the quilt and gathered a corner of it to form a makeshift pillow. "Blue." "Why?" She yawned. The beams of sunlight had already passed the girl's new headrest. And so Zabuza figured she would get another hour of sleep at least. Smart girl. "Blue, huh?" He unrolled the scroll and selected a patch of what would appear to the untrained eye meaningless scribbles. Zabuza bit his thumb on sharpened teeth and pressed it against the paper, releasing a sealed hairpin. As he moved to pick it up a shadow appeared in the window. "Zabuza-sama." He recognized the ever-pleasant voice. "Hiku, what are you doing here?" Said boy flipped the latch on the window with a senbon and slipped in, watching as Zabuza placed the chosen sapphire-studded pin in the whore's hair. It was one of those multi-purpose pins that could be used to kill as well as decorate, and Hiku envied her for a moment. Then he remembered he had already claimed one for himself. And that one had a moving dragonfly on it. Hiku held out a set of tissue-wrapped clothing. "I bought you some new clothes, Zabuza-sama. Ours are getting a little worn down." Understatement. Zabuza mentally added as he removed the paper. "Not too bad. He's even managed to get chain mail reinforcement on the jacket. Find anything for the kid?" "Not really. Naruto-kun is a bit small for a shinobi. And they didn't have anything I thought appropriate. Guess he's still borrowing your things then." Zabuza grinned and began dressing. "We'll need to get him something new though, and the girl, too. How's she coming along on those seals?" "I believe she can manage basic storing, if she can be patient enough to do it and not screw up." Hiku was now smiling too. He remembered learning those, and the hours of washing his hands of the ink when his bloodline came out and splattered it everywhere. He had quickly learned getting mad while dealing with liquids was not a good thing. "Good. She can carry the brat's things then." Zabuza buckled his new jeans, which were rather baggy and so required the buckle. He didn't usually go for the heavy material as it became restricting in the most inopportune moments, but Hiku had picked a size that didn't look too big and still gave him room. It would hold up for a long time, too. And had several pockets. Zabuza had to give his protege props for the pockets. Uruka leaned against his crutch as he hobbled down the hallway. Ninjas were notoriously fast healers, some more than others, and Iruka was in the upper quartile. He smiled good-naturedly at the few nurses he passed and continued on his self-appointed morning exercise. A few of the nurses, ones he recognized as the veterans, watched him with calculating expressions. Uruka nodded politely. If he tried to make a break for the door they would know. Like a sixth sense. That was fine. His goal was not escape from the antiseptic prison but something much more valuable. Information. Most shinobi information gathering took place at night, as did infiltration, as the cover of darkness was commonly considered a valuable ally. Uruka knew better. It was the early morning that Ashino Bai had his guard down with the haze of sleep and perhaps a changing of the watch. Uruka kept his eyes closed and a free hand on the wall. In his mind he counted down the steps to his goal. 2 more intersections, then a left as far as he could remember. His hand met air and he adjusted his estimations. Left at the next intersection. He continued hobbling, peeked his eyes and sent a short burst of chakra. Before placing his hand back on the wall, the Chunin Academy teacher came to the last intersection and turned, reaching into his pocket for the crushed paper cup his pills had come in. He could see the glowing form of a medic nin exit his goal, holding a folder. The man turned, and jumped at the black and red eyes. "Ah, Uruka-sensei, you seem to be getting along nicely." Uruka SMI, led and concentrated as the crumpled cup slipped down to the tips of his fingers. "Yes, I'm not as tired, a bit restless actually. That happens when you don't spend every waking moment manipulating your chakra." The older man teased, glanced down at his folder, and looked back. Uruka had closed his eyes with his hands now empty but for the crutch. "I was a bit hasty," Uruka admitted with a blush. "It was just that I felt so." The medic nodded in understanding. He reached forward and placed a hand on Uruka's head to do a quick diagnostic. "Well, your chakra coils are a bit taxed. Especially around the eyes, but it's nothing I haven't seen before. You'll be fine if you keep up a light exercise." "Light? You're a teacher, Uruka. You should know this." He laughed and turned to leave with a quick goodbye. Uruka strained his ears until he couldn't hear the medic's footsteps and moved to the door. He twisted the handle, noticing the light thud as his cup fell out of the latch and to the floor. His experience as a prankster served him well. He had managed to fit the paper cup into the latch before it locked, enabling him to open it. Uruka Yumino slipped inside the records room and opened his eyes fully, sending a series of quick chakra pulses around the room. "I guess the nice thing about this is I don't have to turn on the light." He moved around the filing cabinets, not really sure what it was he was looking for. Opening one, he peered down while the strain of chakra was beginning to hurt his eyes. He needed to hurry. While sending out the pulses and getting back images was tiring. He control an amount need to see writing was quickly becoming dangerous. Uruka's chakra vision collapsed when he saw a folder shoved in the back. Kyubi. It had originally been labeled as Uzumaki Naruto but had since been scratched out by an angry individual and replaced. Kyubi. No one had bothered to correct it. It was a large file, though most of it had been complied before Naruto entered the academy. Uruka doubted anyone would miss it as he shoved it into the back of his pants. He took a few minutes to rest before beginning the search again. He suddenly wanted to find Mizuki's file. The aching soreness in his arms and shoulders was leaving, to the blonde demon container's contentment, but he still shot little glances at the wooden implement in his hands with some annoyance. Shadow clone Zabuza never gave his katana back, citing some ridiculous reason about learning how before he got a real weapon or some bullshit like it. Naruto hadn't been paying much attention, instead focusing on the fact it was gone. The puff of smoke from the replacement technique and the disappearance of the shadow clone with his sword underlined that fact. But he would get it back, supposedly, and he did, he would be even more kick-ass with it. Of course, if the man did not return his now favorite weapon, Naruto would just have to figure out a way to retrieve his shiny. Probably something that would involve liberal amounts of pudding. Yes, I can stuff it down his pants. Then some firecrackers. Where could I get firecrackers? Naruto chuckled as his plan to liberate his katana developed in his mind. Should it come down to a pudding firecracker watermelon rescue, he stabbed his practice thing, he wouldn't dignify it by calling it a sword, or any variation thereof, into the ground and walked toward his temporary home. If Kin was there, she'd have something for him to eat, and he had seen movement through the drapes, so he was hoping. His fingers had only brushed the door when a small hand covered his mouth and jerked him backward. His heart raced as Naruto's lips peeled back and he made ready to bite his aggressor, when the fresh scent of pine hit his nose. It was weak, but after a moment he realized just who it was. Kin dragged him away from the door and into the woods. Her hair was wet and hung loosely around her from a recent wash. Naruto thought it made her like a vampiress, the way her pale skin contrasted with it. She pointed up and the two of them climbed into the safety of the canopy. It's a mist hunter Nin, she whispered while looking through the leaves with caution. Hunter Nin? Naruto asked, vaguely getting the idea that they must be like Anbu, only after his newest friends. He chewed on his lip and strained his neck to look into the small window. Q-chan and USA-chan are still in there. Hopefully that will work in our favor, Naruto-sama. As Haku had left in the early morning, and Zabuza neglected to return, the hunter might leave quickly. He may conclude that it's only the house of a small family, sheltering some strangers for the night, and move on. But what about Q-chan? I doubt he would be interested in a stuffed animal. Naruto crossed his arms and sat on his haunches, wishing his ears were just a tiny bit better. Then he might have been able to hear what the intruder was doing. He had not forgotten the ANBU's threats to his plush. And the so-called Hunter Nin reminded him too much of them for comfort. Naruto decided they were to be avoided at all costs. After he got his things back. Wait, why would he be after Haku and Zabuza? It's a long story, but I think we should find and warn them. She looked like she was about to say more when the door opened. Both tree-born youths went into stealth mode, such as it was, and wah. Tched silently as the hunter walked around the grounds once before taking off after an invisible trail. Kin racked her brain and realized it was the one Haku had taken to town the day before. Come on, we should get everything and then find Zabuza-san. We may need to make a quick exit. Naruto was a bit curious of the warm surge in his stomach as his conscience whispered something about being predator and not prey. He glanced at his hands, remembering the blood that until recently he would have been hesitant to spill, and wondered why he could only feel sick anticipation. He followed Kin into the small cabin and began throwing his things together, occasionally helping the girl pile culinary implements on a long rolled-out scroll and watching them vanish into smoke. It was Haku's, but Kin apparently learned how to use it. Brown eyes scanned the room, unsatisfied but unable to do more. She held out her arms and the white snow rabbit in the corner hopped obediently into them. I think that's it. Do you know where Zabuza-san would have gone? Naruto thought. Somewhere he could go, wenching. Kin blinked before blushing. The term was archaic but accurate. Let's go. Ona jerked on, the drawer handle causing its contents to spill on the floor with the rest of the mess she had been making during her search. The Yumino's small apartment had revealed nothing besides future lesson plans and, occasionally, a Junin-level scroll that had seen better days. While unusual for an academy teacher, it was not a crime. The logical conclusion she could make was that they were either left over from a time when the Chunin had considered trying for Junin, or he had been looking at specific techniques to help a student specialize. If she was the type to bet, Ona would have gone with the latter. Her lips pressed together in a small show of frustration as she practically turned a dead man's house upside down searching for something that would incriminate him. So far he had just as much miscellaneous school-related things as the Yumino, if not more. What are we missing? Mizuki had not possessed many friends when he had been among the living, though many people could remember the light-haired academy instructor. Several of those people commented on how he had been cursed. On almost every mission out of fire, someone died. On the rare occasions that the body was able to be recovered, the obvious cause of death was not. Growing more annoyed with the puzzle, Ona thumbed open an old folder and began skimming over the pages. Why would someone keep so many old notes? Why would they need the information on a student 6 years out of the academy? The answer crept up on the woman like an unwelcome relative. It was the same reason she kept pictures from her genin days, despite not having any attachment to them. The same reason her closet was filled with colorful casual dresses that didn't appeal to her. He wanted to appear normal. It should have been the first thing she thought of, being a shinobi and all. Ona glanced back as the mess of things on the floor and nudged it with a boot. The collection of scrolls, notebooks, bits and bobs seemed so much more dangerous. A smile wormed its way onto her face. The one that only saw the interior of the torture chambers of late. She had a new subject, one that kept his secrets locked away better than the toughest enemy ninja. Dead men tell no tales. But their relics do. Ona kicked a space clean on the floor and reached out to pick a sheet of paper. There were clues hidden about, something would have to trigger his memory to remind him of his plots. The short-haired woman held the paper to a window, pleased as a pattern emerged highlighting certain sections of words. The record of a student's progress was, in fact, a message. What little joy collected in her eyes vanished as she finished reading it. Konoha was contaminated. Ona glared coolly at the rest of the objects and stood. She would need to go through them all, but first she needed a new notebook. She couldn't begin to guess how far the contamination spread. Konoha existed in a gigantic forest created by the first Hokage, or so history claimed. The sole Fima. Laan Team 7 knew this and if not hated, disliked the Shadaime with a passion that only her inner self could claim. Not many of her peers knew that the main reason for Konoha's humidity lay with the giant trees. This is so gross. Sakura wiped the sweat from her forehead as she took a break beneath a hated tree. Her teammates were busy picking up litter from around the river. Sai was just as emotionless as always. His pleasant if weird smile plastered on his face as he placed a can in his trash bag. Her love and future husband preferred to wade in the river and stab at trash with the pokey stick as it floated by. For sure, that way was marginally more interesting. Sakura moaned in disgust as a drop of dew fell from a leaf above her and landed on her arm. Trees, basically plants in general, trapped water and if they had too much would re-release it. Hence the perpetual humidity in the woods. And the rain doesn't help, why can't we get a good drought? What was that, Sakura? Kashi asked as he lounged on a branch a few trees over, his perverted book open. Sakura hypothesized that he didn't actually read it, and simply stared at the pictures. Her angry side sneered and clawed. I am that he in fact couldn't read and pretended in order to save face. Nothing, sensei, she claimed and pushed off the ground. Who knew D-rank missions could be so miserable? They don't have to be. Inner Sakura crooned. Wading into the icy water shocked her into a better mood. Cold wet was better than hot wet in her modest opinion. Nay, Sasuke-kun. Sasuke grunted and scooped up a cardboard cup. He didn't turn to see her but shook his head causing a few droplets of sweat to fly. Sakura saw it as incredibly sexy. She pressed forward giving thanks that her sandals were designed for gripping on slick surfaces. She reached out and tugged the Uchiha's shirt, hopeful. What? His tone was annoyed. Maybe it was just the heat. It had certainly gotten her irritable. After we complete the mission, would you like to go eat with me? Sasuke-kun. Not really. The reply had been instant, without a moment's hesitation to symbolize thought. Sakura's face went red as her world dimmed. Rejected again. Why doesn't he want to spend time with me? Our love must not be denied. Oh okay. Maybe tomorrow. You must already have plans. The girl called with false cheerfulness and backed up, absently acting a plastic spork caught between moss-covered rocks. Her feet sloshed with water as she climbed out onto the bank, upset. Seeking comfort from the other genin on her team, Sakura slowly made her way over. It would have been nice to have another female to talk to and rant on, or someone to hit and release her frustrations, but neither was available. Sakura speared a candy bar wrapper with more force than necessary. Her face scrunched up as her logic fought with her emotions. Ego and superego were getting a workout. Ah, Sakura-san, did you injure yourself? Came the cool whisper of Sai as he took notice of his new partner. He had been keeping tabs on the others covertly but felt that they were close enough he could mention it without being too obvious. Green eyes glanced up blinking away half-formed tears. No, I'm fine, she whispered back reassuringly and attempted a smile. It looked exactly as Sai's did. The pale boy's gaze whipped over to their lazy sensei meaningfully. Are you sure, Sakura-san? You may confide in me, if you desire. I shall not spread your worries. At least not to anyone you know about. Sakura lowered her head and dug a partially buried kintab out of the ground. She shot her eyes to Kakashi, knowing how he would just brush everything off to the side and make her feel stupid. Most grown-ups did that. He's not a girl but. Sai is pretty nice. Her false smile faded. Inner Sakura cheered, not at all disturbed by the prospect of starting a new relationship with the slim but oh so sexy artist. It's just that, I've always kinda had a crush on Sasuke-kun. Sai nodded as his books told him to. When a girl is speaking it is best to nod and smile. The girl's comments recalled to him Danzo-sama's orders. Encourage its spread. The kunoichi was willing. He just had to find how to turn the Uchiha onto the idea. I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. Sakura continued whispering. Her hands went up in defeat. Sasuke-kun has never been mean about it. But he never wants to do anything with me. I had thought after. She sighed and looked around for more trash, her mood lifted somewhat with the confession. She wasn't expecting the carefully crafted reply. It seems to me, from what I've heard, Sasuke-san is not like most boys. I know. That's what makes him so. Sakura giggled. Inner was beginning to put together the theory that Sai might possibly be bi. Sakura nearly got a nosebleed before pinching the bridge of it, taking a deep breath. Fantasies of 3 ways were not conductive to health during a mission. Sai was twisting his trash bag closed and securing it with a small wire. What you think would work on other boys will not help with Sasuke-san. He does not strike me as the romantic type. Got that right, Sakura mumbled, staring into her own bag. It was only 3/4 filled at best. Sasuke seems to value strength and training more than looks and food. Sai whispered directly into her ear as he walked over. To where their masked Junin was reading to turn in his sack. It was as if a brush fire had been set off in the intellectually strong Kunoichi. Of course, inner Sakura shouted in triumph and pumped her fists. Sasuke-kun's goals. Obliterating someone, he would need to train. She looked at her hands and turned them, examining them from every angle. Not a single blister or callus. Perfectly smooth and pretty. Not the hands of someone who trained much, if at all. She glanced at Sasuke, who was trudging back to land, sack dripping over one shoulder. He looks so capable and confident. So cool. Sakura was blushing again. She lifted her unfilled sack and hit the bottom, starting it spinning close. With Sai and Sasuke turning in, the mission was over. With recent depressing thoughts packed away, in a corner the Haruno turned to congratulate her love on a job well done. Sasuke spun violently on his heel, a kunai launching from his left hand. Sakura gasped as the weapon flashed through the air. ND pinned a large trout to a tree across the river. Sasuke grunted. Damn, trout's been poking its head out from under that log all day. Sakura felt very small as Kakashi admonished Sasuke for killing a creature that didn't deserve it. While asking if the Uchiha intended to waste the meal. The girl's green eyes were mesmerized by the still flopping body of the fish as it struggled against fate, and the kunai. That was amazing. I've always thought I had good aim, but I never would have been able to turn and hit just by hearing it break the water. Slowly she dragged her gaze from the fish as Sasuke stared down their sensei and went to retrieve the fish and kunai. She looked at her hands again, Sai's comment driving deep into her psyche like a seed. Sasuke-kun wants a strong girl. Hey, Pinky, we're going, Kakashi shouted, breaking into the young girl's thoughts. She blinked and wrapped her fingers around the trash sack. Coming, sensei. Anger seethed in her stomach as the fragile line separating Sakura Haruno's 2 personalities began to blur. Damn it, he's supposed to be our Junin instructor. Why doesn't he ever help us train, or teach a new jutsu? All we do are these stupid boring ass chores the civilians are too lazy to do themselves. Sakura was glaring at the cheerful Junin's back, his book nestled in his back pocket as he led them back to the village. I fucking hate him, she groused unconsciously. Next to her, Sasuke held his trash bags with one hand and the dead fish in the other. He barely detected her muttered words but nodded his agreement all the same. Sai, ever watchful of his fellow genin, noticed. Zabuza was paying his tab when Kin entered the establishment wearing her poker face. Naruto followed behind her, eyes bright and curious as he took in the atmosphere. Q was held in his arms, and the look he presented got several snickers from the testosterone-oriented figures and coos from the estrogen ones. Kin was working her way around the bar, trying not to appear obvious in her intent. To an outsider it looked like a brother and sister just stopping in to deliver a message or get a drink. Kin stopped at the bar next to Zabuza while he nursed his last drink. She pulled out 2 stools and sat down, the blond boy hopping up next to her. Both were looking at the large man curiously. Haku thought we should get something new. He answered the unspoken question with amusement. Naruto made a noise of approval, though if it was toward the new outfit or the sudden drink the smiling waitress offered him was unknown. It looks good, Kin offered, truthfully. A tight sleeveless turtleneck showed off the man's pecs and abs tastefully, while the blue and black jacket gave the suggestion of modesty. The familiar pattern of in mail ran throughout the jacket for added protection. Kin noted the multiple pockets and straps on his pants, perfectly sized for the thrice damned scrolls. She envied and hated them at the same time. Slightly jealous she didn't get into town to buy a new wardrobe before the hunter nin appeared. Naruto-sama needed new things too. A hunter showed up at the cottage. Kin muttered casually leaning on the bar top. The only sign he heard her was a slight tensing of the jaw. Fucking Mizuki. How's Haku? He's too pretty for his own good. He can take care of himself. When do the gates close? Soon. The genjutsu user waved away a drink, compliments of the one eye in the corner, and touched Naruto's shoulder. The demon container thanked the waitress for the free milk and hopped down to follow his sister out. Zabuza followed them shortly after. His two companions moved into step with him as he passed an alley. Nay, Zabuza-san, where's my katana? Safe. Haku should arrive soon, he spoke to the girl. They're following him. I think so. It was his trail he went after. There was only one, Haku can handle himself against that. He'll meet up with us later, we have a lead on a good job. Kin accepted the offered paper with a small amount of hesitation. Naruto looked at them with a frown. We aren't helping Haku-kun. No. He suspected he was being followed, but thought it was a stalker. As odd as it is, I'm relieved it's not. This has happened before, he'll do better alone. Kin tucked the paper away and began putting her hair up to keep it out of the way. The hunter was more trouble than he was worth. His sudden presence forced her to cut short her bath. Why are we taking another job? I thought you had enough money, once the jewelry is pawned. Zabuza's smile was wry without the bandages to conceal his teeth. This isn't for the money. If we complete it, he'll owe us. It's always good to have a noble in your debt. Haku stepped off the path and turned, face expressionless. How long have you been following me? Since Mikado village. There was pleasure in the voice. He was pleased to have finally cornered his prey, and it brought up dark memories in the boy. Haku, apprentice to the A-rank Rouge Junin Momochi Zabuza. Your bloodline is of some interest to the Mizuki, you can be taken alive. Not required. I am sorry to disappoint, Hunter-san. The voice now held a sneering quality. You do realize he doesn't care about you. Take me to him and we'll all be better off. Haku could make out the red markings unique to the village hidden in the mist. The man was an enigma hidden under robes and masks, even his weapon of choice of an unknown. Surprise and concealment would not help him. You have made two mistakes, Hunter-san. Oh, sensing he wouldn't get out easy with the boy. The hunter shifted and prepared to fight. I am Zabuza-sama's tool. Only his. Your first mistake was thinking I would change sides. Haku's fingers twitched as Senbon formed. Your second mistake was forgetting that you yourself trained me. I think I would remember that. Haku reached into his kimono revealing the mask he kept close at all times. I meant the hunter division as a whole. In a blink the mask was in place, and his Senbon flying. The hunter deflected them and responded with a volley of kunai. Haku charged chakra into his legs and closed the distance. One of his Senbon locking with a hastily drawn ninja too. Only one life would leave the clearing. Lee, Gai-sensei. Lee, Gai-sensei. Lee, Gai-sensei. Lee. Two spandex-clad ninjas cried out in joy at each other in such a way that those not immune would be drawn into the spectacle as hypnotic suggestion formed a sunset in the background. Though not confirmed, Tenten was willing to bet that despite medical claims Rock Lee did in fact have the ability to channel chakra, it was merely locked away for all but specific uses. Like genjutsu, there was no way the sunset appeared on its own. And Guy wasn't proficient enough in the illusion arts to make such a detailed picture. Seriously, if she squinted she could see a group of dolphins frolicking. Gai-sensei. Lee. Gai-sensei. Lee. I'm so proud of you for mastering this oh so difficult technique. You are truly a genius of hard work. The two males finally reached each other in tears. The hug would have been cute, if it wasn't so creepy. Tenten forced her gaze from her sensei and teammate to look at a large hole in the ground, testament to Lee's mastery of a high-level taijutsu technique. She walked over to the hole to inspect it, trying to glean some clue that would aid in her own attempts at the Omit Renge. Lee being the taijutsu specialist of their team, excluding Gai-sensei. It made sense that he would figure it out first. Lee, I must stress, now that you know it, to never use this technique except under one condition. Guy proclaimed, tears still streaming down his cheeks. The fire in Lee's yes grew from the passion exhibited by their sensei while Tenten and Neji shared a look of annoyance. What is this condition, Guy-sensei? That you only use this technique, in defense of someone you care deeply about. Tenten groaned. Typical sensei. Neji's mouth quirked to betray his own feelings despite the Hyuga shell of indifference. Guy looked up after Lee gave him assurance that he wouldn't turnip plant anyone, and seemed to take in his two other pupils' disheveled appearance. The brunette worked the spit around in her mouth and swallowed while trying to tune out her strained muscles. Sen. Ah. Neji. Tenten. It is clear that though your fires are far from banked, you should rest and rejuvenate. We will be resuming missions shortly, and it would be advisable that you be prepared for them. In celebration of Lee's success we shall drink, and then tomorrow, work. Guy finished with a smile, a twinkling smile. Neji made some sort of affirmative noise in the back of his throat and walked off. Presumably to clean up for the night's party. Tenten stared at her teacher as he took off to do a cool-down 20 laps of Konoha. She was annoyed, and bit her bottom lip as she looked fr. The hole in the ground to the rapidly disappearing backs of her team. What about us? Though more proficient with weapons, the girl had certainly found the technique interesting. She had wanted to learn it. Neji hadn't seemed to care for it, but he had his Jiyuken, and only tried as Guy watched them practice. Tenten had been trying her hardest but quickly realized she didn't yet have the sheer muscle to use it in battle against someone, but at least she could have practiced the motions until then. Right. What about me? Neji had a family style to fall back on, and he was truly talented. A genius. He didn't want the help. Lee had enthusiasm and idolized their sensei. He worked himself to the bone, sometimes quite literally, and so she couldn't begrudge the fact Guy's sensei sometimes spent a little more time with him. Lee needed it, not being able to channel chakra normally. But what about me? Tenten resisted the urge to stomp her feet like a little kid. She was more mature than that, she was kunoichi. Stiffly. The girl walked away from the field and over to a set of training logs. Everything ached from earlier, and it seemed all of her hard work was for nothing. It was obvious that, since Lee had already mastered the Omit Renge, they wouldn't spend any more time on it. Tenten flicked open a storage scroll, oblivious to the small tears gathered in her eyes. It was too dangerous to practice the taijutsu technique on her own, and so she was certain she'd never get it. There was only one thing she could really practice alone. Something twitched painfully as her arm swept back again, reaching for a sickle. And she cursed, immediately dropping the weapon. Tenten rubbed at her shoulder, slowly working her way down her arm, and watched as a muscle in her calf spasmed. What about me? She suddenly didn't feel like going to the celebration, instead favoring the idea of throwing her weapons till she could see the real sun set over the treetops. Shovel. A rare, around Konoha at least. Squirrel called out as they watched the human female toss different types of teeth at the wooden posts. Most of them were hitting needles. A more common breed of the bushy-tailed tree rat replied. Next to them a raccoon. A young one that had been born in the city, corrected them with a yawn. Bow shuriken. The three furred mammals were enjoying the silence since the pale-eyed human had scared their feathered companions off. The silly birds had gotten it into their heads that they were being watched and took to the sky screaming. While the squirrels and raccoon and felt something similar. They didn't jump as it wasn't bearing down on them. Oh, I don't recognize that, the rare flying squirrel muttered. It's let me think, Kusarigama, the unnamed raccoon offered. She was only present because she was bored, not to mention young and foolish as her mother had said. Why ruin a perfectly good setup with the humans? They eat some food, they throw it out, we eat the food. It's just like the little harvest tooth that they use just with the rock and chain. Ah. The brown squirrel began climbing down, showing off the recklessness the species was known for. Can we, maybe, do the whole thing? The lighter squirrel remained in the tree, not liking the idea of exposing itself in unfamiliar terrain. No. The flipping alone had looked idiotic to the flying squirrel. A master at gliding and maneuvering in the air. Too dangerous. The only way I gonna try that is with teaching, and no fire breather is going to do that for us. We're stopping here tonight, Kotaro-san. An aged merchant with liver spots under his eyes called to his guest, the infamous Kotaro Suzuhara, puppet maker extraordinaire and escape artist. His name was something of a legend in the right circles. Like Lady Tsunade, the legendary sucker. Unlike the notoriously in-debt gambler, he had no title, simply mentioning that Kotaro-san and any traveling merchant knew who it was. "Ah, isn't it a bit early to turn in?" Kotaro asked curiously, head whipping around to check for unwanted visitors. He had meet up with the caravan going to tea country shortly after La Aving Suna and quickly talked his way into their good graces. Not to mention most merchants found amusement in thumbing their nose at the cage. If there wasn't so much money to be had, the merchants would gladly skip over the desert city. "There hasn't been any trouble." "No trouble. I'm just a box." Routine was perfect, the border guards didn't suspect a thing. "Sue, why are we stopping so soon?" The puppet maker hopped off the wagon and breathed deep. "No damn sand. Just the refreshing clean air of Fire Country, named so for the dry summers and plentiful wood to make fires. Not to mention the lovely hot springs." The old merchant climbed down and handed his reins to a boy as he cracked his back. "Just a bit of superstition, you see. A few years back they say a great nine-tailed demon fox was sighted in Fire. I don't know if it's true or not, but they say the shinobi population gets real touchy whenever kitsune are mentioned." Sounds like a cover-up. "But, Kotaro old boy, it's none of your business. Suna's got its own demon problems." "Interesting, but what does this have to do with the early stop?" he asked and grabbed his bedroll from the wagon as the horses were led away. The merchant pulled a pipe from his sleeve and lit up, pausing to observe the efficiency of his people as they set camp. Several mercenaries left for a quick patrol. "Demons can't be killed, Kotaro-san. Disembodied, maybe, but not killed. Someone started a fire. Night has always been the time when spirits are at their strongest." Kotaro remembered all the rumors surrounding the cage's youngest. He was at his most hostile at night, especially on full moons. Only the quick or the dead ventured out at those hours. "Gara, you suspect something. This is too heavy for me." "Too bad IG doesn't keep any young girls in his entourage." Gigi smiled, though his eyes betrayed him. "I'm just an old trader, Kotaro-san. What would I know about the affairs of shinobi? But you are headed to Konoha. Got a request to make a leg?" "Of course." Gigi, the boy who took the horses, returned running. His eyes were bright as he brushed dust of his clothes. "I heard you talking about Kyubi-sama. Are you telling stories again?" "And if I was a strong woman," Kotaro would guess she was in her early 30s, turned towards them. She held a spoon dripping with water and bits of rice. "At's this I hear about Gigi-sama telling stories. You're turning into an old man, grandfather." "Silence. That is blasphemy." The mercenaries returned and gave a quick report to the wrinkled merchant. Gigi nodded and motioned for everyone to head towards the bubbling pots. One of the mercenaries had brought back some sort of bear and the meat was roasting over a second fire. "Oh, tell us, Gigi-sama." A hired man called as he stuffed his face. Slowly the old man gave in. What was it with kids? Never wanted to sit still when a story was told, but demanding it when the speaker wasn't. Gigi pet out his pipe and stored it to take a plate from the woman. Kotaro found a seat near the rice pot for easy access to seconds. "There exists a being some say is older than time. I myself think that's total bull. Get on with it." "Silence, Val, or I'll have you sleeping on the dirt. As I was saying, this very old being is also very strong. A single swing of its tail could bring down a mountain or form a tsunami. It is a creature of ancient myth, with the form of a nine-tailed fox. Some say it is a demon, a few claim it is a god, but all fear it." A shadow fell across the old man's face. "To anger that creature is to bring its wrath, and though it may not be immediate, it will always come. Once, a nation angered it, and now all that's left of them is a small island. That nation was Wave." Several people sucked in breaths at the news. Gigi had been from the small country, and they all knew the current situation was the reason the merchant had not returned. As if he didn't hear them, Gigi continued. "They say the fox will not return until shinobi are accepted by the people, and when it does it will either destroy Wave entirely or forgive them. Stupid and childish, maybe, Kenji liked to think of it as in tune with himself in the universe. Currently his childish side was screaming at him to get the F-word out. "Why are we doing this again, Aki?" he asked his friend and leader. "For the money, of course. How often do you think we'll get an opportunity like this? Imagine. All we got to do is find some stupid scroll and we'll be able to get out of our shithole of a village. Aki replied as he kicked at an old abandoned glass bottle. Said bottle rolled along the cold grass for a few feet while Kenji followed it with his eyes. His skin was getting goosebumps as they walked through the streets of the defunct town. Grass had reclaimed most of the streets and shrubs grew wildly out of their gardens. A bleach-white stone reflected moonlight, but it only took EU seconds for the nervous teen to recognize it for what it really was. Bone. He reached out to his friend who was peering into a window. Why yeah, I know, but couldn't we come back in the morning? Kenji. You know what would happen if we did that? We would be questioned, the others that are after the goods would want to help us and then get part of the take. No, it's much better just me and you. He pulled his head out of the window. Nothing in there. Guess it was a storage shed. I wouldn't mind. That's your problem. You're too used to letting people tell you what to do. Gotta take charge. Take things into your own hands. Aki shouted, annoyed. The two of them had been trying to get enough money for a trip to the capital for months and then this deal comes along. Kenji's too scared of the dark to go through with it. Aki snorted. I'm going down to that field we saw earlier. There was some structures behind it. Keep looking around here. Kenji just grunted, white eyes moving from shadow to shadow. He could have sworn he heard something like laughter. Grams used to tell all sorts of bad stories about this place. The fog rolling in didn't help his nervous state any. There. I know I heard something. Kenji turned to an alley and walked around debris from a collapsed wall. There was a rustling, almost like cloth. There was cool breath on the back of his neck. His heart skipped a beat. This isn't funny, Aki. I'm sorry. Aki isn't here right now. He's entertaining the old man. Smooth. Like silk. He wanted to turn around and question the voice, but it sent shivers up his spine and the part of him that had always been more aware screamed at him not to. If he did, he would die. Whoever it was wanted to play with him. They would stop playing if he saw who or what they were. What happened to Aki? The voice was amused. I don't know, yet. The old man hasn't had anything to feed his plants in so long. Your friend is probably helping him. Kenji would have asked more. Desperate to buy time, when a high-pitched scream echoed through the town. The scream turned to a whine and started up again with requests for help. Aki was sorry, Aki didn't mean it. And please for the love of God would Kenji help him. Kenji couldn't move. He was too scared and his senses were screaming too many different things at him. From behind, icy fingertips reached toward him. Welcome, Kenji, to the town of Shikyo. The town of death. Somehow he started running, but he doubted it was fast enough. That's it for today, I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends and don't forget to check out my Patreon. Details in description.